Story 1. In this video, there will be 4 stories. The first one, virginity does not guarantee loyalty. The next one, never ever fight over a cheating partner. The next one, cheating is relationship treason. And finally, karma eventually bites back twice as hard. Now let's get into today's story, and you can see the title coming up on your screen. My husband impregnated my AP wife, and AP stands for affair partner. This story dates back to May of 2016. She starts off by saying, "I was referred here by my sister who saw it getting opinions of people not familiar with my situation could benefit me. I'm a 31 female for this posting. Call me Gina and my husband Greg, 3 male. We've been married for 10 years and together nearly 13. We have 2 children, a girl, 9 and a boy, 8. Greg is the only man I had been with prior to my affair, while Greg had 3 previous girlfriends prior to dating me. We had a great marriage full of love, laughter, and family. Though we had been married for a number of years, our intimacy was completely fulfilling for me, and I believe it was for Greg too. Now, for the part where I ruined everything. I met a man, call him Rich, in my daughter's soccer practice. He was a parent of a 6-year-old girl who was playing in the league below my daughter. He worked from home and was able to attend soccer practice and games. Initially, I spoke to him as part of a group of parents as we stood on the sidelines watching our children. The only reason he stood out is he was one of the few dads that were there during practices which normally took place just after school. Eventually, we started talking more frequently, and then I noticed he would always come right over and stand near me at every practice, even when I was with other mothers. These chats led to an uncomfortable conversation where he told me he had strong feelings for me. I clearly told him I was happily married and we'd have discontinued speaking with this. He backed off while I rebuffed his advances. For some reason, I like the attention. There's that attention and validation that pretty much all women are always looking for, and she's falling for it here. As you can see with this guy, I know it was so wrong now, but I want to be honest here and tell you what I was feeling. Eventually, he brought his feelings up again and asked if I'd meet him for coffee at a shop in the next town over. At first, I told him no, but then decided to meet with him, making it clear it would only be this one meeting for coffee and nothing more. I know now, just talking to him was cheating and totally disrespecting my husband and family, but I couldn't stop it. At the end of our private meeting before we left to go to our children's practice, he told me he wanted me to come to his house tomorrow. At the same time, he gave me a piece of paper with his home address. I said, no, I can't. But with that, he gently kissed me, and I'm ashamed to say, not only did I kiss him back, I kissed him again when he pulled away. Oh my goodness. These are 2 nasty, grimy people. The next day, we met at his house, and Hat is just like that. She meets at his house, and they do the deed. There was no talking before or build-up, we just did it. As I looked around and saw photos of his beautiful wife and child, I became so upset with myself. I started thinking about Greg and my kids and burst out crying, telling Rich I couldn't do this again. We cleaned up, got dressed, and left in our cars for practice. For the next week, I avoided Rich at soccer practice, and when I did eventually speak to him again, I told him I didn't want to see or speak to him ever again. With this, he handed me a note with the name and address of a hotel in the same neighboring town. He said he wanted me to meet him there tomorrow at our special time, but would understand if I didn't come. I just told him, no, I can't. And then I left. That night, I stayed up all night thinking about this situation and how it would destroy my marriage and family if this ever became known. But foolishly, I thought it was unlikely, as we never called or texted, and all of our communications were verbal or via these handwritten notes. You see how sneaky and underhanded people can be when they're cheating if they keep it on the down low like this. A person may never find out unless they slip up, which you're going to see these people do. My intention was not to go, but I broke down and did again. As with our first meeting, it ended with me crying and telling Rich, we cannot do this again. This time he agreed with me, but said our lovemaking was worth the risk. We parted and this time remained apart for a full month with no contact, outside of brief conversations at soccer practice and at games while talking with other parents. What's most disturbing is that at one of the games, now listen to this. This is disturbing. My husband, Greg, and Rich ended up talking for over 20 minutes. This made me feel terrible, but in a way, it excited me in some twisted reason. Man, you are a sicko. If that excited you, you are a sick person. Fast forward to my D-Day, the day my husband discovered my affair, and the absolute worst day of my life. She says, already crying. Rich and I spoke at soccer practice the day before and agreed. We can no longer meet as we were both happily married and loved our spouses and children. If you're cheating on your husband and he's cheating on his wife, you are not happily married. And guess what? You do not love or respect your spouses. That is just bunk. However, and here's where I made a really bad mistake. We agreed to meet one final time. I know people on here are not going to believe me, but it's true. D-Day was to be our final time. I don't believe you. I can tell you that right now. That was not going to be your final time. The only reason why it was your final time is because, as you're going to see here, she gets busted. I didn't want to meet at Rich's house as I couldn't take seeing the photos of his wife and child. So I offered to have him meet me at my home. The plan was for him to park on the adjacent street and walk over to my house, then walk up to the side door where I would let him in. It was slightly raining, and no one was out on the street, so I thought he did so undetected. You see again how much planning goes into these affairs when people lie and they say, oh, it just happened on the spur of the moment. We just did it, because we kind of ran into each other. No, all of these affairs, you'll find out if you really dig deeper, are really well planned out trysts. And no one can get away by saying, oh, it just happened. No, it didn't happen. It was a calculated decision. I took into our home office on the second floor, which has a gas bed, and that is where we got together. I want to say I would have never done anything in our marital bed like we did at Rich's house, as I have too much love and respect for my husband. Really, lady, you have the nerve to say that and write that. Unbelievable, since this was going to be our last time. There was a lot of kissing and foreplay before the actual act, just as we began. My husband Greg came into the room and stood beside the bed recording. I don't know how long he had been there before. He said what the HD double is going on here with this. Rich and I quickly separated and I just started crying, telling Greg I'm sorry, and it could explain everything. Explain what she says. I don't know. But at the time, it was all I could think to say. And a lot of these stories you'll hear, that's one of the first things that people say if they are busted cheating. Oh, I can explain everything, even though they're, you know, naked with another person. And that is just a defense mechanism to buy time. They don't have anything to explain. What are they going to explain? This is crazy. I don't know what got into Rich, but he completely panicked and tried to push past Greg, who was blocking the door. Greg is over 6 feet tall and weighs nearly 230, while Rich is only about 510 and weighs about 160. So he bounced off Greg, falling back to the floor. He got up again and attempted to charge at Greg, but this time Greg stepped forward and pushed him back hard. Now listen to what happens next. The push sent Rich flying back where he hit one of the window screens and fell backwards out the window, landing on a large juniper-type bush we have in front of the house. He was completely naked. I cried and begged Greg to stop as he was going to hurt Rich, and I didn't want him, Greg, to get in trouble with this. Greg just gave me a mean look and ran down the stairs. I was afraid he was going to beat Rich and was so fearful my husband would get in trouble with the law. I watched from the window, wrapped in a comforter, and saw Rich still laying naked in the bush, trying to extract himself. I could see he was scratched up and bleeding, but didn't appear seriously injured. Now we're at a point in this story where I want to encourage you, if you're liking what you hear, hit that like button that will get this video seen by people all over the world. Now, let's go on with our story. Greg emerged from the house holding Rich's cell phone and started shouting at Rich to give him his passcode. Rich started begging for mercy, pleading with Greg not to hurt him and not to call his wife Kate. Greg got angry and told Rich to give me the effing code, or you're going to suffer with this. Rich quickly gave him the code and Greg entered it into the phone. Greg then called Kate and told her who he was and explained that he was standing here with her naked husband, who he just caught having S with his wife. After some additional back and forth and comforting talk, he gave Kate our address and ended the call. I then saw our next-door neighbor walking over. He asked Greg if everything was all right. Greg told him no, but said he'd be okay. Greg then thanked him for calling him and explained he caught us in the act. Our neighbor said he knew something was up when he saw a man sneaking around outside the house. He said at first he thought he was robbing the place until he saw me answer the door and let him in. The neighbor told Greg he just had to call me. Well, Greg, you need to buy that guy a beer. Or better yet, buy him dinner. Or better yet, buy him a huge gift certificate because he said he saved you a lot of grief and future aggravation. Greg told the neighbor he was going to call the police as he wanted to report the situation. Hearing this, Rich began crying and pleaded with Greg not to do so. At this point, he was still naked and had began shaking violently. I shouted down to Greg, asking him to please not call the police, but he ignored us and called. The police came within a few minutes. Greg and our neighbor met the officer out at the curb where they spoke for several minutes, pointing to the neighbor's house and then up to the office window. They next walked up to the bush where Rich was hunched over, crying and naked. This Rich is just an emotional basket case. The officer asked Greg if he could retrieve his clothes, and Greg said he would do so. When I heard Greg open the door, I ran to the top of the steps, crying and telling him how sorry I was and how much I loved him. But he never looked up. He just gathered Rich's clothes and shoes off the floor and stairs and went back outside. The officer took the clothes from Greg and handed them to Rich, and he clumsily got dressed. Rich was hyperventilating and still violently shaking at this point. I had never seen anyone do this and realized it was probably from a combination of nervous fear, shock, and from being cold, as it was only about 55 degrees. I stood at the window while the officer questioned Rich, but they couldn't see me because of the screens we have on our windows. He told Rich to settle down and relax, which he eventually did. Rich said it was all his fault and he deserved it. He explained truthfully what happened and said he charged it Greg, as he just wanted to get out of there. The officer asked him if Greg acted defensively or offensively when he pushed him. Rich replied that it was. Defensively, I was relieved Rich didn't falsely accuse Greg. Soon, a number of neighbors gathered out front. The neighbor who reported me to Greg was explaining to them what was going on. I was so embarrassed and just cried harder. Now back to the police officer and Rich. The officer asked him if he wanted to press charges. Rich said he didn't, and said he just wanted to leave and promised to never bother our family again. After this, Rich's wife, Kate, pulled up out front. My husband walked out to greet her where they spoke for a minute or so. Rich ran over to her crying and saying he was sorry, but she didn't acknowledge him. The officer spoke to her, and I could faintly hear her say she wanted Rich to stay away from her. The officer then told Rich to step back, and he did and started ugly crying. The officer spoke to Greg and Kate for a few minutes, then walked into the house to speak to me. He called up the stairs and asked if I could come down and talk with him. I said okay, but asked him to give me a minute or so to get dressed. The officer then took my statement at the end of our conversation. He said that my husband requested I voluntarily leave the home. I told the officer I didn't want to, and then I needed to speak with my husband. He said he understood, but explained it would be best if I left, at least for tonight, so things could calm down. I cried and he asked if there was anyone I could call, and I told him yes, my parents. No sooner did I say this, I heard my mom on the porch talking to Greg. When I saw her face, I just said, "Mom, I'm sorry. I really messed up bad." The officer explained to Mom that it would be best for me to stay with her for a few days until things settled down. I then went upstairs with Mom to pack. She didn't say anything while I packed, but I knew she was angry, embarrassed, and really disappointed with me. When Mom and I came downstairs and walked outside, only the officer was there, along with several neighbors who were still out on the sidewalk talking. The officer explained that Greg had gone to pick up the kids at school and would be taking them to practice, then out to eat. He said Greg asked that I close and lock the door, and Greg, would call me in a few days to talk. When I got back to my parents' house, both Mom and Dad scolded me for destroying my marriage. I just said I was sorry and explained that I was going to win back Greg's trust. My dad told me that was never going to happen, and that I should just start preparing for divorce. With this, I burst out crying, and Mom asked him why he'd say something like that. He just said, "Because it's true. And that's because your dad obviously is a strong man, and he knows Greg is a strong man, and he knows that a strong man is not going to put up with a cheater for the next 2 days." I texted and called Greg, but he didn't respond. Then, on Wednesday evening, he sent a text stating we can meet on Saturday morning in our house to discuss next steps. He also wrote in the text that he had already explained to our kids what happened, so they were fully aware. I couldn't believe he did this without me. I thought, they must hate me now. In a separate text, Greg said he filed charges against Rich and secured a 30-day TRO, a temporary restraining order. I hated hearing this, as I just wanted this nightmare to end. To make matters worse, the incident was written up in the police section of our local paper. While the paper didn't give names or our house number, it did give our street name and was written. So it was obvious what happened, so now I'm sure she's the talk of the town. Saturday came, and I was both excited and nervous to see Greg again. My dad and Mom drove me and stayed out on the porch as Greg is. Greg and I met inside. I told them they could leave, but Greg said he wanted them there as he didn't trust being alone with me. She says sigh in parentheses. I went in to hug him and he just held up his hands, keeping me away. We sat down and he handed me separation papers. I broke down crying and told him, no, please don't do this. I pleaded and again told him how sorry I was. And I loved him, and only him. He just said, no, you don't, and started explaining the papers. I continued begging, but he just kept explaining how the separation will work. He said I can move back in, but would be staying in the office. That was still just the way I left it. He then said he was splitting our bank accounts $5,050, and we would split the equity in the house if it ever sold, but explained he wanted me to surrender any claim to his 401k. He then went on and explained, now listen to this, that starting next month I would be required to contribute 35%, or about $20,300 per month of our living expenses, including the mortgage insurances, utilities, car payments, food, etc. Since I didn't have a job, I would need to pay him for my half of the savings. He explained that all of this was clearly detailed in the separation agreement and that I needed to get a lawyer to review it. I told him, I don't want to get a lawyer. I just wanted to talk to him about us. He calmly but firmly said, there's nothing to talk about, and said he just wants to officially separate from me. He next explained that the only time he will talk to me would be for matters pertaining to our kids or when our kids are talking to both of us. He said anything else I say will be ignored. I cried and asked if he was going to divorce me, and he said, right now that's my plan. I told him I couldn't live without him, and I will fight with everything I had to keep him. He just looked at me with disgust and started laughing loudly. With that, he yelled out to my parents to come in. He then called his parents on speakerphone and explained everything. He just told me to both sets of parents. It was like a business meeting. While for me, it was torture. I just apologized to Greg and our parents and said I was going to fight to save my husband and family. This all went down this morning, and now I'm here in the office writing this post. At 1:44 a.m., as I can't sleep talking to my sister earlier, she gave me great advice and said I might also want to post here to see if any readers might offer some additional suggestions that could be helpful. So here I am. What should I do? Have I broken my marriage beyond repair? Let me just interject here and tell you, yes, you have. Is there any chance of getting the beautiful life I destroyed back, or is it gone forever? Let me tell you, it is gone forever, she says. All responses, even the bad ones, are welcome. Right now, I just feel like an outcast with no one to turn to. My sister has been great, though she too is disgusted with me. Thank you in advance for reading this and for any replies you send, Gina. So that's the end of her original post. Now I'm going to read a few responses that she got from the community, and all of these responses are from women. I usually pick a combination of responses from women and men, but this time on this posting, all the responses for men were more very short and to the point, like, oh, you're nasty, oh, you're terrible, or I'd divorce you immediately. Things like that, where some of the women had more descriptive and I think a little better comments. And let's get to them right now. The first one says, not only have you destroyed your marriage, you have forever changed the relationship you have with your children, your parents, and everyone in the community. Something similar, though not as dramatic, happened to my sister 6 years ago. Her husband divorced her, and everyone in our small town still refers to her as the home wrecker. Good luck. Here's the second response from a woman who says, do you know how much danger you put your husband in by bringing this strange man into his home? In the heat of the moment, your lover could have seriously hurt Greg by knocking him down. Or your lover could have been seriously hurt or worse when he fell out of the window. Your husband could be facing prison time now, all because of you. You are beyond awful. And then, finally, the third response here. She says, I was in your shoes 7 years ago. I know you're not going to want to hear this, but the best thing to do is to divorce. My loving husband took me back. But our marriage was never the same. He never touched me again, and instead began a relationship with his now wife. He met her through the one-sided open marriage I offered him. We finally divorced 2 years ago. I wish you well. Well, 2 things to say about this response. Number 1, never stay with a cheater. Number 2, open relationships do not work. Now here's the updates. And guess what? There's only one update, and it's a final update that she gave about 15 months later. You can see this update is from August of 2017. So about 15 months later, she says, a lot has happened in my life since I last updated. I first want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Reading all the responses helped me keep going, even though many were very critical of my actions. I can say from experience that not every story has a happy ending. In fact, some endings are just terrible. Greg and I are now divorced. Good job, Greg. That's what you should have done because you never want to stay with a cheater. I tear up now just hearing those words, and I still can't believe it. It's just a nightmare. If you remember from my original post, my husband and I were back living together in our home, even though we were legally separated. Things were cold between us for the first month. But then he started to come around talking to me more, and even laughing and joking with me and the kids. I was feeling good about our progress and was confident we could reconcile if we kept on the path we were on. Then out of the blue, 4 months into our separation, Greg said he wanted to talk with me alone, without the kids. I thought this was going to be a discussion about us taking the next steps towards reconciliation. But instead, he told me he wanted a divorce. I was completely devastated. I know all wayward wives use that term a lot in these posts, but I can tell you I truly was. Greg explained that while he will always care deeply for me as the mother of his 2 beautiful children, the love, passion, and trust he had for me is gone. I tried everything to get him to change his mind, but it was already made up. I broke down and we hugged, but I could tell it was not a hug of a husband and a wife. It was more like two friends, since we had been separated nearly 4 months and had already agreed to the division of assets and custody in the separation agreement. The divorce went quickly and was finalized in February of this year. Greg treated me fairly. He bought out my equity share in our home and even gave me an additional $10,000 as he wanted to make sure I was able to maintain a good home for our kids, even though I had a nice sum of money from the divorce. It was not enough to buy a home, nor was it enough to live on for the rest of my life. So I ended up taking a job at a new donut franchise just down the street from our kids' school. I know the woman who owns the franchise, so I contacted her about working there and she hired me on the spot. Contrary to what you might think, I love working there. The owner is very nice and understanding. My coworkers are awesome and our customers are super friendly. I kind of wished I had gotten a job while I was married, as maybe things wouldn't have turned out like they have. How does the saying go? And I don't mind is the devil's playground or something like that. Oh well, I can't change the past, she says. As for Greg, a month after our divorce was final. Now this is where I think Greg made a mistake. He announced to his family and friends that he and Kate were officially a couple and were expecting a child in August. I ended up finding out through my kids, who are excited about having two new siblings, the new baby and Kate's daughter. This news absolutely destroyed me. I just couldn't believe Greg would do this, and then not tell me about it himself. It's obvious Greg and Kate were seeing each other while we were separated. In fact, the gossip is that they started their relationship right after D-Day. We live in a no-fault state, so it doesn't matter anyway. Unlike Greg and I, Kate decided to divorce Rich right away since the house they were living in was gifted to her, and they apparently had little savings. Their divorce was final months before ours. As for Rich, it's a sad story. He was very broken up by the divorce, and on Halloween of last year, he was picked up for a DUI, driving under the influence. That's a bad charge. Apparently, this was the second such violation. Kate used this to get full custody of their daughter, and now he only has supervised visitation, which occurs at Kate's parents' house as Greg and Kate don't want to see him, and Rich is deathly afraid of Greg. I learned this through gossip. I think it's dirty and cruel for Kate to do this to her child's father, even though she may hate him. But I understand why she did what she did. So on one hand, she's saying, I think it's dirty and cruel for her to do this. But then she says, I understand why she did what she did. I understand why she did what she did. Her husband's a cheater. Her husband's a liar. Her husband has 2 DUIs. Do you really want to trust your daughter with this guy? He's totally unstable. Kate and her daughter are now living with Greg and my kids in my house. Of course, it's no longer my house, but I still think of it that way. This whole separate situation really depresses me. So I try not to think about it, but still do nearly every minute of the day, she says. I try to convince myself that this whole thing with Kate is just a phase for Greg. Just like I went through with Rich, Kate is pretty and young, she's 26. So you can see here, folks, she's very, of course, jealous of this Kate because Kate now has her man. And oh, by the way, Kate is younger by some 5 years, and I'm guessing she's also prettier than the original poster here. So she says she's like a new play toy for Greg since they were brought together under stressful circumstances. I don't think their love is genuine. I still hold hope that one day Greg and I will reunite, but I wish him and Kate the best. Does anybody really think she wishes Kate and her husband Greg the best, that their relationship works and flourishes? No. She hopes that they break up so that she can try to swoop back in and get her husband. Last week I was advised that my contact with Greg will be limited further, as he advised me we will only be talking about our kids via email starting on Wednesday of this week, Greg said. Kate has been communicating with Rich this way, and he wants to do the same. Hearing this broke me even further. I know Kate had to put him up to this, as he would never cut me off like that. See? Everything now is Kate's fault. Even though Kate is a victim of your affair, OP, you're treating her like she's a villain. As for me, I've recently been spending most of my time decorating my new apartment and making it comfortable, making it a comfortable place for my kids. It's only got 2 bedrooms, so things are a little crowded, but we make it work. I wish I could go back and change the past, but I can't. So now I'm just moving forward. One baby step at a time. That's where things are today with me. Thanks for reading this, Gina, so that's her story. And overall, I think her husband handled things up front pretty well. He immediately addressed the situation with his wife. He separated from her legally. He communicated to everyone about the affair, which is a good thing for him to do, and then he immediately divorced her. Now, where I think he made a mistake is when he confronted that affair, partner up in that office, and he pushed hard and he ended up flipping out the window. Even though that guy charged at him, you got to be very careful in these kinds of situations, because if that guy would have gotten hurt, seriously hurt, or even worse, then he could have been in real hot water with the law there. So that's where I say you got to be very careful and never employ violence. Now, the other place where I think he has made a big mistake is jumping into this relationship with Kate. I see no problem with him dating Kate and having fun with Kate, but jumping into a relationship and now having a child on the way, Kate, I think, is a big mistake because all he's done by doing that is forever cemented the relationship with these four people. He is never now going to get this Rich out of his life because now remember, Rich has a child with Kate. So there's always going to be a connection there. And his ex-wife is always going to be in his life as well because he's got children with her. So these four people, these four adults now, whether they want to or not, are going to be part of each other's lives in some respect for a long, long time. And I think that was a big mistake. So I want to hear from you. How do you think he handled this situation? Would you have done something different? Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you have, how have you handled it? I want to hear from you and hit that like button. Story 2. My parents dumped me at age 8 to save my dying sister. 9 years later, they showed up, demanding I fix her life. I told them to kick rocks, and what followed was complete chaos. Sup Reddit. My parents abandoned me with my uncle when I was 8 years old, so they could focus on my sister's cancer treatment. Showed back up 9 years later expecting me to solve all her problems because she's struggling with life. I told them exactly where to go. Now they're trying every manipulation tactic in the book to guilt me into playing happy family. Here's the whole screwed up story. I'm 26 male, and this nightmare has been building for almost 2 decades. Let me start from the beginning so you understand exactly how messed up this situation really is. When I was 8 years old, my sister Victoria, who was 6 at the time, got diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the really aggressive kind that requires years of intensive treatment, constant hospital visits, and basically your entire existence revolving around keeping a kid alive. My parents completely fell apart when they got the diagnosis. Can't blame them for that initial reaction. Finding out your 6-year-old has cancer would absolutely devastate anyone. What I can blame them for is every single choice they made after that moment. About 3 months into Victoria's treatment, my parents sat me down for what they called a family meeting. I was still just this little kid who didn't understand why his sister was suddenly always sick, and why our house had transformed into this weird, sterile zone where I couldn't touch anything without someone screaming at me about germs and contamination. Dad did most of the talking while Mom sat there crying into a tissue. He explained in this overly patient voice that they needed to focus all their energy and attention on Victoria right now. The treatments were incredibly expensive and time-consuming and emotionally draining. They couldn't give me the attention and care I needed while dealing with Victoria's cancer battle. It would be better for everyone if I went to stay with Uncle Frank for a while. Just until Victoria gets better, Mom added through her tears, like that qualifier made the whole thing somehow okay. That while turned into 9 years. Uncle Frank was my dad's younger brother. Never married, no kids of his own, lived in this decent 3-bedroom house about 200 miles away in a completely different state. He worked as a high school shop teacher and spent his weekends fixing up old cars in his 2-car garage that he'd converted into a proper workshop with every tool imaginable. The day they dropped me off is burned into my memory with perfect clarity. Mom cried the entire 4-hour drive while Dad kept his jaw clenched tight and his eyes fixed on the road ahead. I sat in the back seat with a duffel bag containing 2 weeks' worth of clothes, my favorite books, and this stuffed dinosaur I'd had since I was 3 years old. Spent the whole drive trying to figure out what I'd done wrong to deserve this punishment. Uncle Frank met us at the door when we pulled up to his house. He was this tall guy with calloused hands from years of manual work, a weathered face, and an easy smile that made you feel instantly comfortable around him. He shook my dad's hand firmly, hugged my mom gently, then crouched down to my eye level and said, "Hey there, buddy. You like building stuff? Got a project car in the garage that could really use an extra set of hands if you're interested." My parents stayed for maybe 30 minutes total. They gave Uncle Frank a folder with my medical records, school information, and insurance paperwork, talked in hushed voices about emergency contacts and custody arrangements and logistics. Then they hugged me goodbye in this awkward, stiff way that felt more like obligation than genuine affection. Just like that. 8 years old, and I'd been relocated like a piece of furniture they didn't have room for anymore. That first night was absolutely brutal in every way. Uncle Frank made spaghetti with store-bought sauce for dinner and tried to make conversation, asking about my favorite subjects in school and what kind of music I liked listening to. But I just pushed food around my plate, unable to eat anything, kept waiting for my parents to come back through the door and say it had all been some terrible mistake. They didn't. Uncle Frank set me up in the spare bedroom at the end of the upstairs hall. It was pretty bare bones at first, just a bed with plain blue sheets, a dresser with empty drawers, and some shelves with nothing on them. But over the next few weeks, he started bringing home stuff to make it feel more like an actual room. A better desk for homework, with a lamp that had really good lighting, a bookshelf he'd built himself in his workshop, sanded perfectly smooth and stained dark, posters for the walls, because he'd noticed I seemed to like dinosaurs and space exploration. Slowly, methodically, it started feeling less like a temporary crash pad and more like an actual bedroom. My room. Starting at a new school was weird and genuinely scary. Being the new kid always sucks no matter what, but being the new kid who'd been dumped by his parents because his sister was dying? That's a special kind of social nightmare. Kids are absolutely brutal when they smell vulnerability, and boy did I reek of it those first few months. But Uncle Frank had my back from day one in every way. He went to every single parent-teacher conference, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions, like he'd been doing this parenting thing his whole life. Showed up to every school event, even the boring ones like choir concerts where kids murdered Christmas carols for 45 painful minutes. Even joined the PTA because he said someone needed to make sure the woodshop program didn't get cut from the budget. The man worked his regular teaching job during the day, dealing with teenagers who thought power tools were toys to mess around with. Then he'd come home and make actual dinner every single night. Not frozen stuff or takeout, but real food cooked in actual pans. He helped me with homework, even when my math problems made his eye twitch with visible frustration. Taught me how to change oil in a car, fix a leaky faucet, use power tools without losing fingers, balance a checkbook, and manage money responsibly. All the fundamental stuff parents are supposed to teach their kids. He did it without being asked, without keeping score, without making me feel like I owed him something. My actual parents? They called maybe once a month if I was lucky. Always exclusively about Victoria, how she was responding to the latest round of chemotherapy treatments, what the doctors said about her blood counts and prognosis, which experimental treatment protocol they were trying next. Never once asked how I was doing in school or with friends. Never asked if I'd made any friends in my new town. Never asked if I was sleeping okay, or if I missed them, or if I was adjusting to my new life. The occasional visits were somehow even worse than the phone calls. Maybe 3 times a year, they'd make the drive up for a long weekend visit. Always brought recent pictures of Victoria in various hospital settings looking pale and sick. Always talked exclusively about Victoria's treatments and Victoria's struggles and Victoria's incredible bravery through everything. Always made it crystal clear that their real life was happening 200 miles away, and I was just this obligation they had to check in on occasionally. I remember one particularly painful visit when I was 10 years old. I'd just made honor roll for the first time and was so excited to tell them about it. Brought my report card to the restaurant where we were having dinner, hands literally shaking as I slid it across the table. Mom glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds total, said, "That's nice, honey," then immediately pivoted to talking about Victoria's new treatment protocol at the children's hospital and how promising it looked. Uncle Frank saw my face completely fall, saw how I folded that report card back up, and stuffed it in my pocket like it was worthless garbage. Later that night, after my parents had driven back to their hotel, he took me out for ice cream at this place that was open late, made this huge over-the-top deal about the honor roll achievement, put my report card on his refrigerator with about 50 colorful magnets, told literally everyone at the hardware store the next day that his nephew was a straight A student who was going places. That's when I started really understanding the fundamental difference between parents and actual family. Parents are just biology and legal paperwork and shared genetics. Family is the people who actually show up consistently, who notice when you're hurting, who celebrate your wins like they're their own accomplishments. The years blurred together in this weird, predictable pattern that became my normal school year with Uncle Frank, where life felt stable and safe and genuinely good. Awkward visits from my parents, where I felt like a stranger in my own story phone calls, where they updated me on Victoria's medical progress, like I was getting a newsletter instead of actual family news. Victoria went into remission when I was 11 years old. The cancer was completely gone. She was recovering well. I remember thinking maybe now things would finally go back to normal. Maybe my parents would come get me now that the crisis was over and resolved. Maybe we could actually be a family again. They didn't come. "We just want to make sure she stays stable," Dad explained during one of those monthly phone calls. "The doctors say the first year after remission is the most critical period for relapse. We need to stay completely focused on her recovery and monitoring. You understand, right?" I said I understood. What else was I supposed to say? I was 11 years old, so I stayed with Uncle Frank. Turned 12, then 13, then 14. Started high school and joined the robotics club because Uncle Frank thought I'd like the engineering aspect of it. He was absolutely right about that. Turned out I had this natural aptitude for mechanical systems and programming logic. Made some genuinely good friends through robotics, kids who were equally nerdy and obsessed with building functional things. Learned to weld properly in Uncle Frank's garage during summer break when school was out. Started dating this girl named Amy from my English class sophomore year. Normal teenage stuff that my parents knew absolutely nothing about because they were too busy hovering over Victoria to bother asking about my actual life. Victoria relapsed when I was 14 years old. The cancer came back even more aggressive than before. In her bones this time. My parents called Uncle Frank directly that time. Didn't even ask to talk to me first. Just wanted to make absolutely sure he could keep me indefinitely because they were going to be completely focused on Victoria's treatment again, possibly for several more years. Uncle Frank covered the phone and looked at me sitting at the kitchen table doing homework. Asked if I wanted to talk to them about it. I shook my head. What was I supposed to say? Sorry your daughter has cancer again, but also I haven't seen you in 8 months and you forgot my birthday completely? He went back to the call, told my parents in this calm, measured voice that I was doing absolutely fine, and they should focus all their energy on Victoria's treatment. Said it like it was the most natural thing in the world for a teenage kid to live with his uncle instead of his actual parents. After he hung up, we didn't talk about the situation at all. Just went back to our normal evening routine. Later, we went out to the garage to work on the '67 Mustang we were restoring together from the ground up. That car became sort of a therapy project for both of us. Anytime things felt complicated or heavy or overwhelming, we'd go out to the garage and wrench on something until our hands were covered in grease and our minds were clear. Victoria beat the cancer the second time when I was 16 years old. Took 2 brutal years of intensive treatment, but she made it through. I was a junior in high school by then, captain of the robotics team that had won regional competitions. Working part-time at the hardware store where Uncle Frank shopped regularly, had this whole complete life built that had absolutely nothing to do with my parents or my sister. They came to visit that summer. First time in almost a year and a half Victoria was with them this time. Seeing my sister in person, after all those years, was profoundly strange and uncomfortable. She'd been this little kid when I left, barely more than a baby. Now she was 14 and looked like a completely different person. Thin and pale from the years of treatments, but healthy and alive. She had this careful, measured way of moving, like she was still getting used to her body working normally again after so long. We all went to dinner at this steakhouse my parents picked out. The entire meal was awkward as hell. Victoria and I had literally nothing to talk about or connect over. We were complete strangers who happened to share DNA and some vague childhood memories from before everything went catastrophically wrong. My parents kept trying desperately to force conversation between us, asking questions like we were toddlers at some arranged play date. Tell your brother about your art class, Victoria. She's very talented with watercolors. Tell your sister about your robotics team. He's the captain, you know. Very impressive. It was physically painful to sit through. We were 2 people with 0 shared experiences and 0 real connection trying to have a relationship because guilty adults thought we should. After dinner, standing in the parking lot under the harsh fluorescent lights, my parents dropped their bomb on me. They wanted me to come home permanently. Victoria was stable now, officially in remission. They'd gotten their lives back to some version of normal finally. Time for the whole family to be together again. Time for everything to go back to how it was supposed to be before cancer destroyed everything. I looked at Uncle Frank standing beside me. He kept his face carefully neutral, but I could see something in his eyes. Not sadness exactly, more like resignation mixed with quiet dread, like he'd known this moment was coming eventually and had been mentally preparing himself for it. Can I think about it? I asked, voice coming out smaller and less confident than I intended. My dad's expression hardened into that familiar look of controlled anger I'd seen so many times growing up. What's there to think about? You're our son Victoria's better now. We want our family back together. This was always meant to be temporary. I have school here, friends, a job I really like, robotics competition in the fall that we've been preparing for all year. You can do all that stuff at home too, Mom said, reaching for my hand across the space between us. I pulled away instinctively. We've missed you so much, honey. Don't you want to be with your family again? Uncle Frank finally spoke up, voice steady and calm, like always. Let the kid finish high school here. He's got 1 year left. Uprooting him now would be pretty rough on him. Let him graduate with his friends and his team. Dad didn't like that at all. Got this tight, angry look on his face like Uncle Frank had massively overstepped his bounds. But he backed down. Probably didn't want to make a scene in public. Said fine, I could finish senior year with Uncle Frank. Then I'd come home for college and we'd be a proper family again. I didn't correct him. Didn't mention I'd already been looking at colleges within an hour of Uncle Frank's house. Didn't say that I considered his house more home than the place I'd spent the first 8 years of my life. Just nodded and let them think whatever they wanted to think. They left the next day. Victoria hugged me goodbye. It felt exactly like hugging a complete stranger. Awkward and forced and meaningless. My parents reminded me about coming home for Christmas. Said they were planning something really big for the whole family. Now that Victoria was healthy and everything could finally be normal. I watched them drive away and felt absolutely nothing. No sadness, no relief, no anger. Just empty and emotionally numb. "You okay, kid?" Uncle Frank asked, standing beside me on the front porch. "Yeah." "Can we work on the Mustang?" We spent the rest of that weekend in the garage, replacing the entire transmission system. Didn't talk about my parents or Victoria or the future or expectations, just focused on bolts and gears and the satisfying mechanical click of things fitting together properly. Senior year was genuinely great in every way. Our robotics team won the regional competition with a design I'd spent months perfecting. Got accepted to 3 different engineering programs with decent scholarships to each, kept working at the hardware store, and saved up a solid amount of money. Uncle Frank taught me how to manage a bank account properly, how to budget effectively, how to invest small amounts wisely. All the fundamental skills my parents had never bothered teaching me. The college I finally chose was called Riverside Tech, about 2 hours from Uncle Frank's house, close enough to visit on weekends if I wanted, far enough away to feel properly independent. Great engineering program with professors who'd actually worked in the industry for years. When I told my parents over the phone, they absolutely lost their minds. "We thought you were coming home," Mom said, voice going high and panicky. "We've been planning for you to go to State University. It's only 30 minutes from the house. You could live at home and save money on room and board." "I got a significantly better scholarship at Riverside," I explained, which was completely true. "And Uncle Frank's been helping me look at off-campus housing options for sophomore year." Dad grabbed the phone away from her. His voice had that sharp edge it always got when I wasn't following the script he'd written in his head. "We're your parents. We want you home with us. We've already sacrificed enough time with you. This separation has gone on long enough already." That line really stung deep. They'd sacrificed time with me? Like I'd been on some extended vacation for 9 years, instead of being the kid they'd shipped off when things got complicated and inconvenient. "I'm going to Riverside Tech," I said flatly. "Already paid my deposit. Registered for fall classes. It's completely done." Long, heavy silence on the line. Then Mom started crying audibly in the background. Dad got angry, voice rising as he launched into this long rant about how I was being selfish and ungrateful and disrespectful, said they'd done everything they possibly could for me and Victoria both. Said family was supposed to stick together through everything no matter what. Said I was throwing away a chance to rebuild our relationships. I let him finish his whole speech. Then I said very calmly, "I'll talk to you later," and hung up the phone. Uncle Frank was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, pretending to read the newspaper, but obviously listening to everything. He didn't ask about the call, just slid a root beer across the counter and asked if I wanted to catch the baseball game on TV. That summer before college was absolutely perfect. Worked full-time at the hardware store, getting promoted to assistant manager. Helped Uncle Frank finally finish restoring the Mustang completely from front to back, went camping with friends. Had a completely normal summer doing normal 18-year-old stuff. My parents called exactly twice that whole summer, both times trying to convince me to transfer to State University before fall semester started. Both times I said no. Eventually they stopped asking about it. College was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Solid engineering program with professors who actually cared about teaching and student success, challenging coursework that made my brain hurt in the best possible way. Made friends with people who shared my interests and didn't think spending Friday nights arguing about optimal gear ratios was weird. Started dating someone named Hannah sophomore year. She was studying business management and had this infectious laugh that made everything feel lighter and easier. Thought my upbringing was weird when I eventually explained the whole situation, but didn't treat me like I was damaged or broken. Just accepted it as part of my story. Uncle Frank came to visit once a month like clockwork. Always brought homemade food because he said dorm cafeterias were committing crimes against nutrition. Always asked detailed questions about my classes and projects, and actually listened carefully to the answers. Always reminded me I could call anytime, day or night, if I needed anything at all. My parents called maybe 3 times that entire first year of college, always brief and awkward conversations. Always ending with some passive-aggressive comment about me choosing to be so far from home. Like 2 hours was some impossible distance instead of barely outside the suburbs. Victoria added me on social media sophomore year. Sent this long message saying she wanted to reconnect. Said she understood why I'd kept my distance, but hoped we could have a real relationship as adults. Now that we were both older and more mature, I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That I was glad she'd survived cancer, but had zero interest in playing siblings with someone I barely knew? That felt too harsh and complicated, so I just ignored it completely. She tried a few more times over the next couple years. Birthday messages, holiday texts, always the same energy of someone trying desperately to force a connection that had never existed in the first place. I never responded to any of them. Uncle Frank asked me about it once during one of his visits. Your sister keeps trying to reach out. You okay with just ignoring her like this? Don't really know her, I said simply. We're related by blood, but that's it. She's their kid. I'm yours. Uncle Frank got this look on his face, cleared his throat hard, and went back to reading the menu we'd been looking at. But I caught him wiping his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. Graduated college with my engineering degree and a solid GPA. Got hired by a great firm that does industrial design for manufacturing equipment. Started at a decent salary with good benefits. Bought my own place about an hour from Uncle Frank when I was 25 years old. Nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom house with a garage where I could work on projects. Life was genuinely good. Great job with advancement potential. Great girlfriend who understood me. Great relationship with Uncle Frank. Built this whole complete existence that had nothing to do with the people who'd abandoned me years ago. Then, last month, my phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer, instead of letting it go to voicemail like I usually did. It was my mother. Hadn't heard her voice in over a year. She had this fake, cheerful tone that immediately put every one of my defenses on high alert. Hey, honey, how are you doing? It's been way too long since we talked. I've been meaning to call, but you know how time just gets away from you sometimes. What do you want? I asked, not bothering with pleasantries or small talk. That threw her off completely. Long pause. Then she launched into this rambling explanation about how Victoria was really struggling badly. She'd graduated college 2 years ago, with a communications degree, but couldn't find steady work in her field. Been living at home with them ever since, dealing with depression and anxiety, having serious trouble adjusting to normal adult life after spending so many years being sick. She's had such a hard time finding her place in the world, Mom said, voice dripping with sympathy. And we thought maybe you could help her out. You've done so well for yourself. Maybe you could talk to her, give her some guidance and career advice. She looks up to you so much as her big brother. I actually laughed out loud. Couldn't help it. She looks up to me? She doesn't even know me. We've had maybe 10 actual conversations total in our entire lives. You're her brother. She needs family support right now during this difficult time. Biologically, I'm her brother. That's where it ends. I don't know her at all. She doesn't know me. We're complete strangers. Mom's voice got sharp and angry. She almost died. Multiple times. We did everything we possibly could to save her life. The least you could do is show some basic compassion and human decency. You did everything you could for her, I corrected carefully. You did absolutely nothing for me except ship me off when I became inconvenient to your priorities. That's not fair at all. We were dealing with a child with cancer. We didn't have a choice. It was pure survival. You had choices. You made them. You chose her every single time. I don't blame you for that decision. But you can't be surprised or angry now that I chose myself and my own life. She tried every guilt trip in the playbook. Said I was being selfish. Said Victoria desperately needed family support right now. Said they'd hoped raising me would have taught me something about compassion and responsibility and family loyalty. Uncle Frank raised me, I said, voice cold. You shipped me off at 8 and visited 3 times a year. Don't pretend you had anything to do with who I became. That's when Dad grabbed the phone away from her. His voice had that specific edge it always got when I didn't immediately fall in line with whatever they wanted. Your mother is trying to help your sister, and you're being incredibly disrespectful and cruel. Victoria has had an extremely difficult life. She needs support right now, and you're in a position to provide it. Family supports? Family. That's how this works. Then support her yourselves. I'm busy with my own life. You're her brother. You have a responsibility to her. I'm Uncle Frank's nephew. That's my family. Victoria is your daughter. You made that distinction extremely clear when I was 8 years old. He started yelling then, really yelling loud, about duty and obligation and family responsibility, about how ungrateful I was for everything they'd supposedly done, about how they'd done their absolute best in an impossible situation, and I needed to stop holding grudges like a child and grow up already. I let him rant and rage for a while. When he finally ran out of steam, I said very quietly, "I'm not holding a grudge. I'm just not interested in having a relationship with any of you. That's the natural consequence of your choices 18 years ago. I'm completely good with it. You should be too." Hung up before he could respond. Sat there for a solid minute, just processing the entire conversation. Then I immediately called Uncle Frank. "Parents just called," I said, when he picked up. "Figured they might eventually. Victoria's been struggling pretty bad, and they're scrambling for solutions. They want me to help her find a job and give her life advice." "What did you tell them?" "That she's their problem, not mine." Uncle Frank was quiet for a long moment. "That's harsh, kid, but probably fair given all the circumstances. They made their choices. You get to make yours." We talked for a while longer. He didn't tell me what to do, never did that. Just listened and let me work through my thoughts out loud. Asked good questions that helped me process everything. That's what real parents actually do. Thought that would be the end of it? Should have known better. The next week brought emails. Long, rambling messages from my mother about family and forgiveness and healing old wounds, and moving past hurt feelings. Dad sent shorter ones, mostly just demanding I step up and do the right thing and stop being selfish. Victoria sent one too. Much longer than the others, said she was genuinely sorry for whatever happened when we were kids, but she'd really like to meet for lunch somewhere neutral. Said she felt like she was drowning and could really use someone who understood what it was like to feel abandoned and alone in the world. The manipulation was almost impressive in its sophistication, trying to create this bond over shared trauma, when the actual trauma was that my parents had abandoned me specifically to save her life. The irony was apparently completely lost on all of them. I deleted all the messages without responding to any of them. Then they showed up at my house. I was working from home on a Friday, designing a conveyor system for a manufacturing client, when someone started pounding hard on my front door. Opened it to find my parents and Victoria standing on my porch looking determined. They'd driven 4 hours to ambush me in person. "We need to talk," Dad said, immediately pushing past me into my house, like he had any right to be there. Mom followed close behind, looking around my place with this weird expression on her face, like she was genuinely surprised I could function as a competent adult. Victoria hung back awkwardly by the door, looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. "You can't just ignore us forever," Dad continued, standing in my living room. "We're your family. Victoria needs help and you're going to provide it. That's final." I closed the front door slowly and crossed my arms. "No, I'm not. She's your sister. She's a stranger who happens to share my DNA. Her problems aren't my problems. Her life isn't my responsibility." Mom started crying, the same manipulative tears she'd used on me when I was a kid. "How can you be so cold and heartless? After everything we've been through as a family? After everything we sacrificed?" "What family?" I asked flatly. "You shipped me off when I was 8 years old. I haven't lived with you since then. We talk maybe twice a year at most. Victoria and I have had maybe 10 actual conversations total in our entire lives. We're not a family. We're related people who barely know each other." Victoria finally spoke up. Her voice was quiet and shaky. "I know all of this is my fault. If I hadn't gotten sick, none of this would have happened. Our family would be normal. But I'm trying to make it right now. I really want to know my brother. I want us to have a relationship." "That's not how relationships work," I said, trying to keep my voice level and calm. "You don't get to show up 18 years later and demand a connection just because it's convenient for you now. Real relationships are built over time. We don't have that foundation." Dad stepped forward aggressively. "Listen very carefully. Your mother and I sacrificed everything to keep Victoria alive. We made incredibly difficult choices. You think it was easy sending you away? It destroyed us emotionally. But we did what we had to do to save our daughter's life. We chose to keep her alive. And we'd make that exact same choice again." "Congratulations," I said coldly. "She's alive. Your job is done, mission accomplished. Now get out of my house." "We need you to help her find a job," Mom said desperately. "Your company must be hiring for something. She has a degree in communications. She just needs someone to give her a real chance. You could put in a good word for her with your boss." The sheer audacity was absolutely breathtaking. They wanted me to leverage my professional network and reputation for a sister I didn't know, because she couldn't figure out her own career path. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "You're being petty and vindictive," Dad snapped. "This is revenge because you're still angry about your childhood. Grow up already. Victoria needs help and you're in a position to provide it. That's what family does for each other. Then be her family yourselves. I'm not her family." That's when things got really ugly fast. Dad started yelling about what an ungrateful, selfish person I'd become. How disappointed he was in me. how they'd raised me better than this. Mom cried harder, making these dramatic sobbing sounds that echoed through my house. Victoria just stood there looking absolutely miserable. I pulled out my phone calmly. "You have 2 minutes to leave my property before I call the police and have you removed." "You wouldn't dare," Dad said, but I could see real uncertainty in his eyes now. I started actually dialing the number. 1 minute 30 seconds. Mom grabbed Dad's arm hard. "Let's just go. This clearly isn't working. We'll figure something else out." They left, but not before Dad made absolutely sure to tell me I was making a huge mistake, that I'd regret treating family this way someday, that one day I'd need them and they wouldn't be there for me when it happened. "Perfect," I said. "We'll finally be even then." Slammed the door in their faces and locked it. Stood there shaking with pure adrenaline coursing through me. First time I'd ever really stood up to them like that. Felt absolutely terrifying and incredibly liberating at the same time. Called Uncle Frank immediately. He answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "They came to your house?" "Yeah. Just left about 5 minutes ago." "Are you okay?" "I think so. They wanted me to get Victoria a job at my company." Uncle Frank made this disgusted noise. "That's bold even for them. What did you tell them?" "No, just no." "Good. You don't owe them anything, kid. Not a single thing. Remember that always." We talked for over an hour. He reminded me that I'd built a genuinely good life without their help or involvement. That choosing to protect my peace and boundaries wasn't selfish. It was healthy and necessary. That blood doesn't obligate you to people who fundamentally hurt you. By the time we hung up, I felt solid again. Centered and clear. The emails got significantly nastier. After the house visit, Dad sent multiple messages about how I'd changed so much. How Uncle Frank had clearly poisoned me against them over the years. How I used to be such a sweet, caring kid, before I got bitter and angry and resentful about everything. Mom tried a completely different approach. Sent these incredibly long messages about Victoria's serious mental health struggles. About a suicide attempt last year that they'd never bothered telling me about. About how desperately she needed family support, and how I was the only person who could really understand her, because we'd supposedly both been abandoned in different ways. The manipulation was absolutely expert level, making Victoria's suicide attempt somehow my responsibility to fix. Acting like we'd both been abandoned when I was literally the one who actually got left behind. I forwarded all the messages to Uncle Frank and Hannah. Both confirmed I wasn't crazy for seeing the manipulation tactics clearly at work. Hannah had actually been the one pushing me hardest to set firmer boundaries for months. She'd met my parents once during a surprise visit they'd made to my apartment last year. Watched them spend 2 straight hours talking exclusively about Victoria's problems while barely acknowledging I existed in the room. Told me afterward that my family dynamics were genuinely toxic, and I should seriously consider going completely no contact. She was absolutely right. 2 weeks after the house ambush, I sent one final email to all 3 of them. "I'm done with all of this permanently. Don't call me ever again. Don't email me. Don't show up at my house. We're not family. We're strangers who happen to share some DNA. I genuinely wish Victoria the best with her life and her recovery, but I'm not part of her support system. I'm not part of your lives at all anymore. This isn't anger or revenge or grudge holding. This is me choosing peace and boundaries and my own well-being. Uncle Frank is my family. You're just people I used to know a long time ago. Lose my number permanently." Hit send before I could second-guess myself at all. Mom called immediately. I declined the call and blocked her number. Did the exact same thing with Dad's number and Victoria's number. Blocked all 3 of them on every social media platform. Blocked their emails. Completely cut off every possible avenue of contact. Then I called Uncle Frank one more time. Did it. Went full no contact with all of them. "How do you feel right now?" he asked carefully. "Lighter. Like I finally let go of something heavy I've been carrying around for years." "Good. You deserve peace, kid. You've earned it." That was 6 months ago now. Haven't heard from any of them since. Not sure if they've tried to contact me and the blocks are working perfectly, or if they finally got the message loud and clear. Either way, my life has been measurably better without them in it. Work is going great. Just got promoted to senior designer. Hannah and I moved in together last month. Uncle Frank comes over for dinner every single Sunday without fail. We're building something real. A family based on choice and mutual respect instead of biology and obligation. Victoria sent one last message through a mutual cousin about a month ago. Said she understood why I'd cut contact completely. Said she hoped someday I'd be willing to talk to her. Said she was getting professional help and working on herself and her issues. I didn't respond. Honestly, hope she figures her life out and finds happiness. But it's absolutely not my responsibility to help her do that. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks. Story 3. This story is titled, No One Wants You Here. My brother said, my parents nodded in agreement. I just picked my stuff and left. But 2 months later, they are begging me because they are losing the house. Hey everyone, before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Okay, Reddit, this is going to be a wild ride. I've been wanting to share this story for a while now, but honestly, it still gets my blood boiling just thinking about it. But after what went down last week, I figure it's time to let it all out. Fair warning, this is going to be long as EF. First, let me set the stage. I'm 25 male, working as a diesel mechanic at one of the biggest shops in our city. Been doing this since I was 18, started as an apprentice and worked my way up. Not trying to flex, but I'm pretty damn good at what I do. Like, I'm the guy they call when the other mechanics can't figure shit out. Those big Cummins engines. I can tear them down and rebuild them with my eyes closed at this point. But see, this isn't the life my parents wanted for me. Mom, 52 female, and Dad, 54 male, had this whole plan where I'd go to college, get some cushy office job, and be their perfect success story. When I told them I was going to trade school instead of college, you'd think I told them I was becoming a professional dumpster diver or something. The disappointment was real. Then there's my younger brother Jake, 20 male. This kid, man, where do I even start? Picture the most stereotypical entitled Gen Z kid you can imagine. Then multiply that by 10. That's Jake. While I'm out there busting my ass in 95-degree heat, crawling under trucks, and coming home looking like I took a bath in motor oil, this dude's living his best life playing video games and finding himself. The real fun started when I turned 21. I was making decent money by then. Not Jeff Bezos money or anything, but solid enough to have my own place if I wanted. But my parents hit me with this whole family should stick together speech. Stupid me, I bought into it. That's when they dropped the bomb. I needed to start paying rent. $800 a month to be exact. Now, I'm not against paying rent. That's fair, right? I'm an adult, making money, should contribute to the household. But here's where it gets fucked up. Jake pays nothing. Zero. Zilch. Nada. Their excuse? He's still in school. Yeah. School, meaning taking 2 classes at community college that they're paying for, which he's probably going to fail anyway because he spends more time on his PS5 than in class. Let me break down a typical day in our house because this shit is important for context. I'm up at 5:30 a.m. at the shop by 7, working my ass off all day, dealing with crazy deadlines, angry customers, and engines that weigh more than my brother's car. Meanwhile, Jake rolls out of bed whenever he feels like it, maybe goes to his one class of the day, if he's feeling ambitious, then parks his ass on the couch for his daily gaming marathon. Mom makes his breakfast, his lunch, his dinner, does his laundry, cleans his room. Kid's living like he's got a personal butler service. Me? I'm lucky if there's any food left when I get home. Half the time, I'm grabbing drive-thru on my way back from work because Mom didn't know when I'd be home, so she didn't make extra. The double standards were so obvious it was almost funny. If Jake leaves dishes in the sink, no problem. If I leave a coffee mug out, you're being disrespectful to the household. Jake wants new gaming equipment? They'll have it ordered before he finishes asking. I need new tools for work. You know, my actual job. You make good money, you should pay for that yourself. But here's the real thing, and I didn't find this out until much later. They were using my rent money to pay the mortgage. Not like contributing to it, straight up using my $800 to make the whole damn payment. So basically, I was paying for the roof over all our heads while being treated like some unwanted house guest. I tried talking to them about it. Multiple times. Every conversation went the same way. Me. Don't you think it's unfair that I'm paying rent while Jake lives here free? Mom. He's focusing on his education. Me. He's barely passing his classes. Dad. Don't be jealous of your brother. When you were his age? Me. When I was his age, I was already working full-time. Mom. Everyone's path is different. Dad. If you don't like it, you can always move out. And round we'd go. It was like talking to a wall, except the wall was actively gaslighting me. The crazy thing is, I put up with this for years. Kept telling myself it was temporary, that eventually they'd see how messed up it was, that Jake would grow up and start contributing. Instead, it got worse. Way worse. And on the top of that, my parents had this really interesting way of defining rent. According to them, that $800 only covered my bedroom and basic utilities. Everything else? That was extra. Want to use the washing machine? That'll be $30 extra per month for water and electricity usage. Want to park in the driveway instead of on the street? $50 monthly parking fee. Need to store your work tools in the garage? Another $40 for storage. I wish I was making this shit up. Meanwhile, Jake's living like he's at a five-star resort. Kid has the master bedroom. Yeah, you read that right. They gave him the bigger room when he turned 18 because he needs space for his gaming setup. He's got his own bathroom, while I'm sharing one with my parents like I'm still in high school. And get this, he has a dedicated gaming room that used to be my dad's office. They literally moved all my dad's stuff to the dining room so Jake could have a proper streaming setup. One day, I'm doing an oil change on my truck in the driveway, because where else am I going to do basic maintenance? Jake comes out whining about how the noise is ruining his stream. My dad actually had the balls to tell me I needed to do my vehicle maintenance at the shop instead, on my day off. Using shop equipment I'm not supposed to use for personal vehicles, because it was disturbing precious Jake's Twitch stream that has like 12 followers. But the real kicker? The absolute cherry on top of this shit sundae? They started itemizing my food consumption. No joke. Mom would go grocery shopping, and suddenly there's a list on the fridge with Mike's portion, calculated down to the last fucking slice of bread. A gallon of milk? That's $4.50 on my tab. Used 3 eggs for breakfast? $1.50. Want some of the dinner mom cooked? Better cough up your share of the ingredients. Jake, though? This kid's eating like a king. Mom's making him special trips to Whole Foods for his dietary preferences. Translation: he watched some YouTuber talk about organic food and decided he's now a health guru. He's got his own snack cabinet that's literally labeled Jake's Do Not Touch. Meanwhile, I bought myself a pack of protein bars and found half of them gone the next day. When I brought it up, Mom said, "You should hide your food better if you don't want to share with family." Share with family. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. The financial drain wasn't even the worst part. It was the constant psychological warfare. Every family dinner, the ones I was allowed to join if I paid my portion, turned into a highlight reel of Jake's achievements. Jake might start streaming full-time. Translation: he's dropping out of community college. Jake's got such a good eye for investments. He bought some sketchy crypto after watching a TikTok about it. Jake's really finding his passion. He spent $300 of their money on a course about becoming an influencer. Me? I could literally rebuild an entire semi-engine, save a trucking company thousands in repairs, and get a commendation from my boss. And the most I'd get is, "That's nice, honey. Jake, tell us more about your new YouTube channel." The worst part was watching my skills and hard work get completely dismissed while they celebrated Jake's every minor achievement. I won Mechanic of the Month 3 times in a row at my shop. Crickets. Jake got 100 followers on Twitch. Mom made him a fucking celebration dinner. One particular day really stands out. I just finished a massive job. We're talking 16-hour day, complex transmission rebuild on a $200,000 truck that needed to be back on the road ASAP. Customer was so happy with my work, they sent a thank you letter to my boss and gave me a $500 tip. I came home actually excited to share some good news for once. Walk in the door, and the house is in full celebration mode. Balloons, cake, the whole 9 yards. My first thought was maybe they'd finally noticed my hard work. Nope. Jake had just hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Mom had invited his streaming friends over, ordered catering, with my rent money probably, and Dad even bought him a new microphone as a "congratulations on your success" gift. When I tried to share my news, Mom literally patted me on the head like a dog and said, "That's great, honey. Oh, could you transfer your rent early this month? We need to upgrade Jake's internet for better stream quality." I wish I could say this was the worst it got, but nah. This was just the warm-up. The real shit show happened about 3 months ago. For context, I'd just dropped about $8,000 on a new professional tool set. If you're not in the industry, that might sound insane, but any mechanic will tell you that good tools are your lifeblood. We're talking snap-on everything. Ratchets, sockets, diagnostic equipment, the works. Had to finance part of it, but it was worth it because these tools were literally my future. I kept most of my tools at the shop, but I had this one toolbox at home for side jobs and personal projects. Nothing crazy expensive, but still probably worth around $2,000. Had it organized perfectly. Every tool in its place, everything labeled. Yeah, I'm that guy. Even had some specialized diagnostic equipment I'd saved up for. This particular day, I'd pulled a double shift because we had a fleet of trucks that needed to be ready by morning. I'm talking 16 hours of nonstop work. My hands were shaking. I'd drunk enough coffee to kill a horse, and all I wanted was to shower and pass out. pull up to the house around 11 p.m. and I see lights on in the garage. Weird, since my parents' cars were gone. But whatever, I'm too tired to care. I just want my bed. Walk into the garage and my fucking heart stops. My toolbox is on its side, tools everywhere. And there's Jake and his dipshit friends, clearly drunk, using my pro diagnostic scanner as a fucking doorstop for their beer pong setup. You know that moment in movies where everything goes quiet and the camera zooms in on the main character's face? That was me. I literally couldn't process what I was seeing at first. These drunk idiots had turned my garage into their personal party zone, and my tools, my livelihood, were their party props. Yo, Mike, Jake slurs, like this is totally normal. We needed space for the table. Hope you don't mind, bro. Mind? Mind? My $1,200 diagnostic scanner is holding open the garage door. My socket sets are scattered across the floor like fucking confetti. And my toolbox, my perfectly organized toolbox, looks like it got hit by a tornado. I lost it. Not like throwing punches lost it, though believe me, I wanted to. But that cold, deadly calm kind of anger, where your voice gets real quiet. What the fuck did you do? Jake, this absolute waste of DNA, just shrugs. Chill out, man, they're just tools. We'll put them back later. Just tools. I walk over to my scanner, and sure enough, the screen's cracked. That's $1,000 right there, minimum. Start checking my other tools. Sockets missing, ratchets damaged, precision instruments just gone. And these drunk idiots are still trying to play beer pong around me like nothing's wrong. That's when one of Jake's friends, some douchebag in a Supreme hoodie, stumbles and spills beer all over my electrical testing equipment. Probably another $500 down the drain. I grab Jake by his shirt. Not my proudest moment, but fuck it. Do you have any idea how much this stuff costs? He pushes my hand away, getting aggressive now. Get off me. Dad will buy you new ones if they're so precious. Stop being such a bitch about it. Dad will buy me new ones. Dad will buy me new ones. I start taking pictures of everything. The damage, the beer cans, the whole scene. Jake's starting to look nervous now. What are you doing? Documenting everything before I call the cops. That sobers him up real quick. You wouldn't dare. We're family. And that's when my parents walk in. Perfect timing, right? Mom takes one look at the scene and starts yelling at me for grabbing Jake. Dad's right behind her, already running his mouth about how I'm overreacting. They're just having some fun, Dad says, like I'm the asshole here. You can't expect them to not use the garage just because you keep your stuff in here. I show them the broken scanner. Mom's response? Well, maybe if you paid more rent, you could have a proper storage space for your things. That was it. That was the moment something in me just broke. Or maybe it finally got fixed. I don't know. I looked at them. Really looked at them. My mom fussing over Jake like he's the victim. Jake smirking behind them because he knows he's untouchable. You're right, I said, real quiet. I should get proper storage for my things. Went upstairs, grabbed my laptop, and started making calls. That night, after everyone went to bed, Jake passed out on the couch, of course. I sat in my room and did something I should have done years ago. I made a spreadsheet. Yeah, I know, super exciting, right? But trust me, this spreadsheet became my weapon of mass destruction. I documented everything. Every single penny I'd paid them over the past 4 years. $800 monthly rent equals $38,400. Utility fees equals $4,800. Parking fees equals $2,400. Storage fees equals $1,920. Food. Contributions equals roughly $7,200. Various household expenses they made me cover, $5,000 plus grand total, almost $60,000. $60,000. That's not even counting all the tools Jake and his friends destroyed. While I'm putting these numbers together, I get this text from Jake. Hey bro, sorry about the tools and stuff. Dad says he'll give you $200 to replace anything that broke. We good? $200. For thousands in damaged professional equipment. I didn't even respond. Instead, I started making calls. First to my buddy Chris, who works in real estate. Turned out he had a client with a garage apartment for rent. Then to my bank to check my savings. Thank God I'd been putting money aside despite my parents bleeding me dry. Finally, to my boss to ask about picking up some extra shifts. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember how I mentioned I'd been paying their mortgage without knowing it? Well, I did some digging. Turns out my $800 rent was exactly the amount of their monthly mortgage payment. Not close to it. Exactly it. They hadn't been contributing a single penny to the mortgage in 4 years. So I came up with a plan. A beautiful, karma-filled plan. First step, I signed the lease on that garage apartment. It was small, but it had a secure space for my tools, and no entitled little brothers using my stuff as party decorations. Put down the deposit that same night. Second step, I started moving my stuff out quietly. Not everything at once. I'm not an amateur. Just a few things each day when nobody was home. The important stuff went first. What was left of my tools, important documents, irreplaceable items. Nobody noticed because, well, nobody ever paid attention to my stuff anyway. Third step, I documented the tool damage meticulously. Took photos, videos, got written statements from two of Jake's friends who were actually decent enough to feel bad about what happened. Made copies of everything and stored them in 3 different places. This would come in handy later. Trust me. Fourth step, I went to the bank and opened a new account at a completely different bank. Started redirecting my paychecks there, canceled all the automatic payments to my parents' accounts, but the master stroke, I waited. See, I knew exactly when their mortgage was due, the first of every month, and I knew they hadn't saved a penny because why would they? They had their reliable cash cow living upstairs. The whole time I'm doing this, life went on as normal. I kept going to work, kept nodding along at dinner when they praised Jake's latest business idea. He was now convinced he could become a cryptocurrency millionaire. Kept acting like everything was fine. Mom did try to talk to me about the tool incident once. She came to my room with that fake concerned look she'd perfected over the years. Honey, I know you're upset about your tools, but Jake feels really bad about it. Maybe if you hadn't left them in the garage. I just nodded and said, You're right, Mom. I should find a better place to keep my things. She looked so relieved, probably thought I was finally understanding their side of things. Little did she know I was already 3 steps into my exit strategy. The best part? Jake kept making it easier for me to justify what I was about to do. Every day there was some new BS. He borrowed my car without asking, came back with an empty tank. He had his friends over again. He even had the balls to ask me to co-sign for a loan so he could invest in his streaming career. Meanwhile, I'm watching my parents enable everything. Dad bought him a new gaming chair because his back was hurting from streaming too long. Mom was now doing his laundry and folding it and putting it away because he was too busy with content creation. All while I'm still getting bills for my share of utilities and being told I need to contribute more to the household. But here's the thing about people who think they're untouchable. They never see the fall coming. And boy, was this going to be a long fall. I had my move-out date circled on my calendar, July 31st. Why that date? Because their mortgage was due the next day. And August was about to become a very, very interesting month for my dear family, July 31st. I'd taken the day off work, first time in months, and made sure to wake up early, like 5 a.m. early. Why? Because I wanted to be gone before they could try to stop me or guilt trip me into staying. I'd seen enough Reddit stories to know how these things usually go down. My new place was already set up. I'd been secretly moving stuff over for weeks. All that was left was my bed, my work clothes, and a few boxes of random stuff. I'd rented a small U-Haul the night before and parked it around the corner where they couldn't see it. The best part? I'd scheduled my move for the exact day I knew would hurt them the most. See, their mortgage was due on the 1st, and I knew for a fact they didn't have the money. How? Because I'd accidentally seen my mom's online banking screen when she was asking me to loan her money for Jake's new streaming microphone last week. Their account had less than $1,000 in it. The plan was simple. Get my stuff out, leave my key, and ghost them until the inevitable meltdown. But you know what they say about best laid plans. I'm quietly carrying out my last box when Jake stumbles out of his room. My brother, ladies and gentlemen, finally awake before noon, only because he'd been up all night streaming. He looks at me, looks at the box, and his hungover brain takes a full minute to process what he's seeing. The fuck are you doing? I just kept walking. Didn't even look at him. That's when he noticed my nearly empty room through the open door. Mom! Dad! Mike's trying to leave. Here we go. I heard the thundering footsteps as my parents rushed upstairs. My dad, still in his bathrobe, face getting red already. Mom right behind him, already starting with the waterworks. What is the meaning of this? Dad's using his authority voice, the same one that used to scare me when I was a kid. Not anymore. I set down my box calmly. I'm moving out. Like hell you are. You can't just leave. What about your responsibilities to this family? I pulled out my phone, opened my spreadsheet. You mean these responsibilities? Started reading out the numbers. Every payment, every fee, every dollar they'd squeezed out of me while letting Jake live like a prince. Mom's face went from fake tears to real panic as the numbers kept going. That's $60,000 over 4 years, I finished. Oh, and here's the best part. I know that's been going to the mortgage that's due tomorrow. Dad's face went from red to white so fast I thought he might pass out. Mom grabbed the wall for support. Jake just stood there, mouth open like a fish. You, you can't do this to us, Mom whispered. Actually, I can, and I am. But wait, there's more. I pulled out a manila envelope. This is all the documentation of the tools Jake and his friends destroyed. About $3,500 worth of professional equipment. I'll be filing a small claims court case next week unless I'm reimbursed in full. Jake started sputtering. But you're my brother. You can't sue me. Watch me. Dad tried to step in front of the door. You're not leaving until we sort this out. I'm 6 feet 2 inches and work with heavy machinery all day. Dad's 5'10" and hasn't seen a gym since the 90s. I just looked at him until he moved. The rent you've been charging me? That's more than my new place costs. The utility fees? Bullshit made up to fund Jake's lifestyle. The storage fees for my tools? Look how well that turned out. I picked up my box again. I've got all the documentation, all the payments, all the texts where you demanded money, every receipt, every bank statement. If you try to cause problems, it all goes to a lawyer. Mom was full on crying now. Please, the mortgage. We don't have. Not my problem anymore. Maybe Jake can start paying rent. Oh, wait. That would require him to actually have a job. Jake lunged at me. I sidestepped and he crashed into the wall. Real tough guy when he's not surrounded by his drinking buddies. By the way, I added, heading down the stairs, I've already changed my direct deposit information at work and closed our joint account. Good luck with the mortgage tomorrow. I heard Mom collapse onto the floor, sobbing. Dad was yelling something about family duty and responsibilities. Jake was still threatening me, but now, from a safe distance. I loaded my last box, got in the U-Haul, and drove to my new place. Total silence from them for about 6 hours. Then the texts started. Oh boy, did they start. Let me paint you a picture of how that first day went down. Hour by hour, I watched their messages evolve from anger to panic to straight-up desperation. It was like watching the 5 stages of grief, except nobody died, just their financial stability. First wave came from Dad. All righteous anger. 8:15 a.m. Get back here right now. 8:20 a.m. You're making a huge mistake. 8:45 a.m. No son of mine acts this way. 9 a.m. Answer your phone. Jake showing his usual maturity. 12:15 p.m. Dead when I find a. 12:20 p.m. Hoper happy breaking up the family. I didn't respond to any of them. Just kept screenshots of everything for my records. But around 3 p.m. that's when reality started hitting them. The mortgage payment was due the next day, and they finally checked their bank account. Even Jake started realizing things were serious. 7 p.m. Come on, man, don't do this. 7:30 m. I'll pay you back for the tools. 8 p.m. Mom and Dad are freaking out. 8:30 p.m. This isn't funny anymore. I spent that evening in my new apartment, enjoying the peace and quiet, watching their messages roll in while eating takeout on my couch that nobody else had the right to use. The next day, August 1st, was when shit really hit the fan. See, not only did they miss the mortgage payment, but that was just the beginning. Remember all those subscriptions and services they'd been paying for with my rent money? Jake's premium internet for streaming, his gaming subscriptions, Mom's fancy gym membership, Dad's golf club dues, their Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, and whatever else, all of it started bouncing. Their cards got declined everywhere. Jake's Twitch stream went down mid-game because they couldn't pay the internet bill. You should have seen his chat explode. All 15 viewers very confused. Then the real panic set in. Mom called me crying about how the mortgage company was sending notices. Dad left voicemails about fixing this as a family. Jake's messages got increasingly desperate as his streaming setup started falling apart piece by piece. But here's the best part. They started turning on each other. Through my cousin, the only family member I still talk to, I heard about the epic fights. Dad blaming Mom for not saving money. Mom blaming Dad for spoiling Jake. Jake blaming them for not having a backup plan. Everyone blaming me for being selfish. The cherry on top? Jake had to get a real job. Like an actual job at the local Walmart. Day 1, he had to help carry groceries to cars in the summer heat. Posted on his Instagram about how hard manual labor is. I nearly pulled a muscle trying not to comment, "Welcome to the real world." By the end of the first week, they'd tried everything. Dad came to my workplace, security escorted him out. Mom tried to guilt my boss into giving her my new address. He laughed and said no. Jake's friends messaged me offering to pay for the tools. Too little, too late. They even sent our old pastor to talk some sense into me. But the real karma? That was just getting started. Because what they didn't know was that missing one mortgage payment was about to trigger a domino effect that would change their lives forever. Their comfortable little world where Jake was king and I was the ATM, that was about to come crashing down hard. See, my parents had been living way beyond their means for years, using my rent money to maintain their lifestyle and fund Jake's dreams of internet stardom. Without my monthly $800, their entire budget went up in flames. First, the mortgage company started calling, then the credit card companies, then the utilities. Turns out they'd been paying everything on a razor-thin margin, and one missed payment was all it took to send everything tumbling down. But let me break down how it all played out, because each family member's reaction was priceless. Let's start with Jake. My precious brother's journey from future Twitch star to reality was a thing of beauty. Week 1 at Walmart, he got written up for being on his phone during shifts. Week 2, he had a meltdown because a customer disrespected him by asking him to help load groceries in the rain. By week 3, he was begging his streaming followers for donations. He made $2.47. The internet getting cut off was the final nail in his influencer career coffin. His last stream was him literally crying about how unfair life is while the video quality kept dropping until it finally went black. His 12 viewers were very supportive though. They spammed F in the chat. Mom's breakdown was more gradual. First, she had to cancel her fancy gym membership, then her weekly hair appointments, then her essential spa treatments. She tried getting a job for the first time in 15 years. Turns out, professional enabler isn't an in-demand skill on LinkedIn. She ended up working at the same Walmart as Jake. Different shift. The irony of them both wearing those blue vests after years of looking down on retail workers? Chef's kiss. Dad's ego took the biggest hit. He'd always played the role of successful provider, even though I was the one actually providing. When he had to sell his golf clubs to make a partial mortgage payment, something in him just broke. His country club buddies stopped inviting him to their weekly games. Turns out friendship only goes as far as your wallet in those circles. Last week, they finally had to put the house up for sale. They're moving into a 2-bedroom apartment next month, all 3 of them. Jake's furious because he has to share a room with Dad. Mom's devastated because the apartment doesn't have a proper entertaining space for her book club that she can't afford to buy books for anyway. The real cherry on top? I got promoted at work. Lead mechanic position, significant pay raise, company truck. When word got back to them, they tried reaching out again with a business proposition. Apparently, they wanted to invest in my success by moving in with me so we could pool our resources as a family. I replied with a screenshot of their mortgage statements showing how they'd exploited me for years and told them to lose my number. So here I am, sitting in my paid-for apartment, all my bills up to date, my tools safely stored in my own garage, watching my family learn some very expensive lessons about consequences. Jake's still at Walmart, now in a 3-month competition with Mom for Employee of the Month. Neither has won yet. Dad's delivering pizzas at night, and I'm getting ready to take a 2-week vacation with the money I've saved since stopping my family contributions. Life's funny sometimes. For years, they treated me like an ATM, a servant, a backup plan. Now they're learning the hard way that you can't treat people like garbage and expect them to keep funding your lifestyle. To everyone who followed this saga, thanks for the support. Edit. Since people are asking about the tools, yes, I did file in small claims court. Hearings next month. I have all the documentation, photos, and even statements from Jake's friends. Should be interesting. Edit 2. Holy shit. This really blew up. Thanks for all the awards. And no, I won't help them get back on their feet. They can walk on their own for once. Final update? Just heard from my cousin. They're having a family meeting to discuss pooling resources to survive in the apartment. Apparently, they're expecting Jake to contribute 1/3 of the rent. The same Jake who called in sick to Walmart 3 times last week because streaming is his real job. Good luck with that. Story 4. This story is titled, "She Slapped Me Too Hard, So I Called Off the Wedding." Now she's begging me to take her back. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and makes sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey guys, so I've been sitting on this for a while, trying to wrap my head around everything. Honestly, I'm not the type to post personal stuff like this, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. It's been a few weeks since this all went down, and even though I know I made the right decision, it still feels unreal. I was engaged to someone I thought I'd spend my life with, but one night changed everything. Let me explain. My name's Adam, I'm 29, and I work in IT. I've always been pretty chill, maybe even too much so. I don't like drama or making a big deal out of things. I'd rather talk stuff out and move on, you know? Kendra, my ex-fiancée, was the opposite. She's 27, works in marketing, and is the kind of person who thrives on energy. She's charismatic, super outgoing, and loves being the center of attention. When we first got together, her fiery personality was one of the things I loved about her. She was passionate, determined, and had this confidence that made you believe she could take on the world. Over time, though, I started noticing that her passion sometimes crossed a line into stubbornness. There were little red flags I ignored, like the time we went to a dinner party with my coworkers, and she made a comment about how I could have dressed better in front of everyone, laughing like it was a joke, or how she always had to pick the restaurant when we went out. And if I suggested something different, she'd either roll her eyes or say, "Well, I guess you don't care if I enjoy dinner." At first, I thought it was just her being particular, but it started to feel like things always had to go her way. So it became clear that if she wanted something, she wouldn't back down until she got it. I brushed it off for the most part because, well, no one's perfect. Fast forward 4 years, and we're engaged. Wedding planning was intense, to say the least. Kendra wanted this massive, Pinterest-perfect wedding with over 200 guests, an elaborate venue, and God knows how many floral arrangements. I, on the other hand, wanted something smaller, intimate, and manageable. We weren't rolling in money, and I didn't see the point of blowing our savings on a single day. But every time I brought up my concerns, it turned into a fight. She'd accuse me of not caring about the wedding or not wanting to put in the effort. I tried to explain that I wasn't against the wedding. I just wanted us to be realistic. It wasn't just about the guest list either. Every detail had to meet her exact vision. I remember one time she spent 2 hours debating with the florist about the color of the centerpieces, only to snap at me when I suggested we go with something simpler. "If you're not going to take this seriously, why are you even here?" she said, completely ignoring the fact that I'd left work early to make it to that appointment. It wasn't about compromising. It was about her winning. Then came that night. We were in the living room, buried under the chaos of wedding planning. Papers were scattered everywhere, sticky notes clinging to random surfaces, and a big binder stuffed to the brim sat open on the coffee table. Kendra had spent months assembling that thing, and now it looked like it was holding her sanity together by a thread. She was pacing back and forth, her words tumbling out in an endless rant about finalizing the guest list. She was fixated on inviting a sea of distant relatives I couldn't even begin to place. Cousins thrice removed, their kids, their plus ones. It felt absurd. I sat on the couch, watching her whirl around the room like a storm, trying to find the right moment to speak. "Kendra," I said cautiously, "do we really need to invite people we barely know? Shouldn't this be about the people closest to us?" She stopped mid-step, slowly turning to face me. Her eyes were sharp, her posture stiff. "Why don't you take this seriously, Adam? Do you even care about this wedding?" That question hit like a punch to the gut. I felt the tension in my chest rise, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Of course I care," I said evenly. "But it's not about how many people are there or how extravagant it is. It's about us, about starting our life together." Her expression darkened and her voice rose. "You just don't get it. This isn't about us. It's about celebrating what we have with the people who've been there for our families. This is supposed to be the most important day of our lives, and you're treating it like a business transaction." "It's not that," I said, struggling to keep my frustration in check. "I just think we need to be realistic. We can't afford to invite half the state. That's not what's going to make the day special." Her laugh was short and bitter. "Realistic? You mean cheap, right? You don't care about making this day memorable. You just care about the price tag." "Kendra, come on," I said, my voice tightening. "That's not fair. I'm trying to keep us from going into debt over this. Isn't that what matters? Starting our marriage on solid ground?" "You always do this," she snapped, stepping closer. Her tone was sharp enough to cut. "You make me feel like I'm ridiculous for wanting something beautiful. Why do I even bother trying to make this special when you clearly don't care?" I stood up, my frustration boiling over. "Don't put words in my mouth. I care, but I'm not going to pretend throwing money at it will make it better. This is supposed to be about love, not putting on a show for people we barely know." She was trembling now, her face flushed, her hands balled into fists at her sides. "You're impossible," she said through gritted teeth. "You don't hear me. You never hear me." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I thought the tension might break into something softer, maybe a chance to de-escalate. But then she closed the distance between us, her movements abrupt and determined. "Kendra, let's just—" Before I could finish, her hand came down hard across my face. The slap echoed in the silence that followed, leaving a sharp sting on my cheek and an even deeper one in the pit of my stomach. For a second, I just stood there, stunned. I've never been in a situation like that before, and it felt like time froze. My cheek was burning, but it wasn't the pain that got to me. It was the sheer disbelief. This was someone I loved, someone I was supposed to marry, and she had just crossed a line I never thought she would. I stared at her, my mind racing to process what had just happened. Her expression shifted immediately from fury to shock. Her mouth opened slightly, her face pale. "Adam," she whispered, her voice shaky and unsteady. I I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't." I couldn't speak for a moment. I could feel my chest rising and falling as I fought to keep my composure. Looking back, there'd been moments leading up to this. The way she'd throw verbal jabs when she didn't get her way, or escalate every disagreement until I was the one who brushed it off to keep the relationship. This wasn't a one-off. It was the boiling point of something that had been simmering for a long time. Finally, I stood up, slow and deliberate, and met her eyes with a calmness that surprised even me. "Pack your things," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. Her eyes widened, and she took a half step back, her hands clutching each other. "What? Adam, wait. No, I didn't mean it. You have to believe me. I wasn't thinking. I was just so—" "Stop," I interrupted, holding up my hand. "I don't care what your excuse is. You put your hands on me, Kendra. That's not something I'm ever going to tolerate. Get your stuff and get out." She started crying, pleading with me to let her explain, but I wasn't having it. "There's nothing to explain," I said firmly. "You crossed a line, and I'm done. Pack your things and go." She tried to argue, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into backing down. I stood there, arms crossed, watching as she grabbed her purse and some of her things. Her hands were shaking, and she kept looking at me like she was expecting me to change my mind. But I didn't. When she finally left, the house felt eerily quiet. I sat back down on the couch, staring at the wedding binder and the mess of papers she'd left behind, realizing that I had just ended a 4-year relationship in the span of 15 minutes. And the craziest part? I wasn't even angry anymore. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, notifications. It felt like the whole world wanted to know what was going on. Kendra must have told a few people, and it spread like wildfire. I decided to start dealing with the fallout. First, I called my parents. My mom answered right away, her voice bright and cheery, like she was expecting a wedding update. "Adam, how's it going? Did you and Kendra finally decide on the cake?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, there's no cake. There's no wedding. I broke it off." She didn't say anything. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "You what?" In that tone only a mother can pull off. Equal parts shock and disappointment. "Look, it's a long story," I said. "But it's over. Kendra's out of the house, and I'm calling off the wedding." She didn't take it well. "Adam, this is a huge deal. People are expecting a wedding. Do you realize how embarrassing this will be for everyone involved?" "Mom," I cut in. She crossed the line. More silence. Then she softened. "Oh, honey, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied. "But I'm not marrying someone who thinks that's acceptable." That seemed to click for her. She let out a long sigh and said, "I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. I'll tell your father. Do you need anything?" "No, I'm good. Just maybe give me some space for a bit?" She agreed, though I could hear the worry in her voice. After hanging up, I moved on to the next task, canceling the wedding. I started with the venue. The woman on the other end was polite but hesitant when I told her we wouldn't be moving forward. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "We'll need to discuss the deposit." "Keep it," I said. "I don't care." Then there was the photographer, the caterer, and the DJ. Each call felt like ripping off a bandage. By the time I was done, I was mentally drained. That's when the texts from Kendra started pouring in. At first, they were apologetic. Long paragraphs about how she was sorry, how she didn't mean to slap me, how stress overwhelmed her. Then they shifted to anger. "I can't believe you'd throw away 4 years over one mistake," she wrote. "You're being so dramatic." By the end of the day, they were a mix of desperation and guilt-tripping. "You're ruining my life," she texted. "Everyone's asking me what happened, and I don't know what to say." I didn't respond to any of it. What was there to say? She knew what she'd done. Things got worse when mutual friends started reaching out. Some were supportive. My buddy Nate called to check on me. "Dude, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just dealing with the fallout." "You did the right thing," he said. "No one should have to put up with that." Others weren't so understanding. Kendra's friend Taylor, for instance, decided to take her side. She started posting vague but pointed comments on social media. Stuff like, "Some people can't handle a strong, independent woman," and Imagine being so fragile you ruin a relationship over nothing. She didn't tag me directly, but it was obvious who she was talking about. It didn't bother me as much as it should have. If anything, it was just annoying. I didn't care what Taylor thought of me. What did bother me, though, was how Kendra's parents reacted. Her mom called me the day after I ended things, her voice shaky and full of guilt. "Adam, please don't do this," she said. "Kendra's been under so much stress. She didn't mean to hurt you." "I'm sorry," I replied, "but there's no coming back from this. I can't marry someone who thinks it's okay to lay hands on me, no matter the reason." "She's devastated," her mom said. "She loves you. Can't you give her another chance?" "No," I said firmly. "I've made my decision." Her dad called later that evening, but his tone was colder. "I don't know what happened," he said, "but this is going to reflect badly on both of you. People will talk, Adam. Are you ready for that?" I almost laughed. "With all due respect, sir, I'm more concerned with my personal boundaries than what people might say." He hung up shortly after, clearly unimpressed. By the end of the week, it felt like I'd been put through the ringer. I wasn't sad or heartbroken, just exhausted. The emotional weight of dealing with everyone's opinions was heavier than I'd expected. Then came the rumors. Someone, I'm guessing Taylor, started spreading word that I'd overreacted and that Kendra was the real victim. A few mutual acquaintances reached out to hear my side, which was their polite way of saying they didn't believe me. "She said she was just stressed," one person texted. "You didn't have to kick her out, did you?" I ignored the message. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Despite all the noise, I felt lighter without Kendra in my life. The house was quieter, yes, but it was also peaceful, and there was a space to breathe without arguments and tantrums. Still, something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. Kendra's reaction to the breakup felt off. Sure, she was upset, but her focus seemed less on what she'd done and more on how I'd responded. The way she tried to paint herself as the victim didn't make sense, especially since she was the one who crossed the line. I started wondering if there was more to the story. Was the slap really just a moment of stress? Or was there something deeper going on? It wasn't like her to lose control like that. That nagging thought stayed with me until I met up with Lauren, a mutual friend who always seemed to know what was really going on. I wasn't expecting much, but what she told me changed everything. She called me up one afternoon, sounding hesitant, which was rare for her. Lauren isn't the type to hold back. She's blunt, and that's one of the reasons I've always trusted her. "Hey, Adam," she started. "Can we talk? I think there's something you should know about everything." I could tell by her tone that this wasn't going to be good. "What's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even though I felt a knot forming in my stomach. She paused for a moment, then said, "Not over the phone. Can we meet in person?" I agreed, but my mind was already racing. I hung up and sat there for a while, staring at the wall, wondering what she could possibly have to tell me. Whatever it was, I had a feeling it was going to put the last few weeks into perspective. I spent the rest of the day going about my business, but my focus was shot. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Kendra's reaction to everything, the way her friends and even her parents were trying to spin the situation, it didn't add up. She wasn't just sorry for what she did. She was desperate to control the narrative. And that desperation? It reeked of guilt. I started replaying everything in my head, trying to piece together the bigger picture. Kendra wasn't some loose cannon. She was calculated, always thinking 3 steps ahead. That slap wasn't just her losing her temper. It felt intentional, like she wanted me to react. But why? Then there was the way she'd been blowing up my phone. At first, it was all apologies and tears. But when I didn't respond, it turned into anger and blame. One of her texts stuck with me. "You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. Just talk to me, and we can fix it." Fix what, exactly? I hadn't done anything wrong. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like she was projecting, like there was something she was hiding, and she needed me to stay in the dark. By the time I met up with Lauren, I was ready to get some answers. We met at a little cafe downtown, one of those places that's always packed but somehow manages to feel cozy. Lauren was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a coffee in front of her. She looked up as I walked in, and the expression on her face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be a casual chat. I slid into the booth across from her and gave her a nod. "All right, Lauren, spill it." She hesitated, which wasn't like her. "Look," she said, "I didn't want to get involved, but after everything that's happened, I feel like you need to know." "Know what?" I asked, leaning back in my seat and crossing my arms. She sighed. "It's about Kendra and Chase." Hearing that name made my jaw tighten. Chase. That guy again. Kendra's so-called friend. And I'd heard about him before, always in passing, like he was no big deal. But something about the way she mentioned him now made my stomach twist. I've never liked the idea of her having guy friends. Not because I don't trust her, but because I know how guys think. And Chase? Yeah, I had a feeling he wasn't just some harmless buddy. What about him? I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. My friend was at a bar a few weeks ago, Lauren began. She knows you and Kendra were engaged. I've mentioned you guys a few times, so when she saw Kendra there, with Chase, she thought something seemed off. Off how? I asked. There it was. The thing I'd been trying to ignore since the slap. I didn't say anything, just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. They were holding hands, she said, lowering her voice like someone might overhear. And kissing. Took a picture, but she didn't know what to do with it, because she didn't want to cause drama. I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. Drama? This whole situation is a drama. Let me see the picture. Lauren hesitated again, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled for a moment before sliding it across the table. There it was. A blurry but unmistakable photo of Kendra and Chase, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. I stared at it, feeling a strange mix of anger and clarity. Well, that explains a lot, I said, pushing the phone back toward her. Adam, I'm sorry, Lauren said. I didn't know if I should tell you, but after everything I couldn't keep it to myself. I appreciated her honesty, but I wasn't mad at her. None of this was her fault. Thanks for letting me know, I said, my voice calm. Too calm, probably. You okay? She asked, eyeing me like she thought I might blow up. I nodded. Oh, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. At least now I know the truth. The truth was, I wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, I'd known something wasn't right for a while. Kendra had been acting weird for months, distracted, defensive, picking fights over nothing. I'd chalked it up to wedding stress, but now it all made sense. She wasn't just stressed, she was guilty. And that slap? That wasn't just a moment of frustration. That was her trying to bait me, to give her an excuse to flip the script and make me the bad guy. She didn't want to be the one to end things because that would have made her the villain. So instead, she pushed me until I snapped, or at least until she thought I would. But the thing is, I didn't snap. Didn't give her that satisfaction. I stayed calm. I told her to pack her things and leave. And now, with Lauren's information, I knew I'd done exactly the right thing. I sat there in the cafe for a while after Lauren left, sipping my coffee and thinking about my next move. I wasn't going to confront Kendra right away. No, I wanted to see how she'd react when I didn't take the bait. She'd been trying to control the narrative since the breakup, painting herself as the victim and me as the unreasonable fiancé who couldn't handle the pressure. But now I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let her spin her lies any longer. By the time I got home, I had a plan, and I preferred to do this face-to-face on my terms. So I texted her, "We need to talk. Meet me at my place tomorrow at 7 p.m. She responded within minutes. Finally, I've been waiting for you to reach out. I knew you'd realize you overreacted. I didn't bother replying. Let her think what she wanted. Tomorrow she was going to see just how wrong she was. The next day, just before 7 p.m., I cleared my living room. The coffee table, usually cluttered with work papers, was empty except for a single printed photo sitting right in the center. Everything about the space was intentional. Calm, controlled, deliberate. Kendra thrived in chaos, in shouting matches and emotional outbursts. But that wasn't my game. I was setting the terms. At 7 p.m. sharp, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, finding Kendra standing there in a dress I recognized immediately. It was the one she wore on our 3rd anniversary, back when things were good. She'd paired it with flawless makeup and her most disarming smile. The effort was obvious. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking against the floor. She said, "I'm glad you reached out. I knew you'd come to your senses." I motioned toward the couch, not responding. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat down, her smile faltering slightly when she noticed the photo on the table. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of paper as she adjusted the picture. Her hands stiffened. Her voice tightened. "Where did you get this? Does it matter?" She looked up, her confident demeanor cracking. "It's not what it looks like. Then why don't you explain it to me?" She hesitated, the gears turning in her head as she searched for the right lie. Finally, she let out a small laugh, though it sounded hollow. "Adam, this is ridiculous. Chase is just a friend. Someone must have misunderstood what they saw." I stayed where I was, my face calm, my stance unshifting. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably long, until she broke eye contact, looking down at the picture again. Adam, she tried again, her tone softer now, almost pleading. I know this looks bad, but I swear, stop. The word came out sharp, cutting her off. Don't waste my time. We both know what this is. So why don't you drop the act and tell me the truth for once? Her shoulders slumped slightly, and for the first time, she looked unsure. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. Fine. Yes, I was with Chase. But it wasn't serious. I didn't mean for it to go anywhere. I pushed off the wall and took a step closer. It wasn't serious? I repeated, my tone cold. Then what was it? A hobby? A stress reliever? Explain it to me because I want to know how cheating on your fiancé fits into your grand plan. Her lips trembled, but she quickly masked it with a defensive tone. I was overwhelmed, Adam. The wedding, the planning, everything. I felt like I was drowning. And Chase, he was just there when I needed someone to talk to. Talk to, I said flatly, gesturing toward the photo on the table. You call that talking? She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. No, I said, taking another step closer. You just didn't care enough not to. Her head snapped up, her expression a mix of anger and guilt. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising. I made a mistake, okay? But you weren't exactly perfect either. You were so distant, so focused on budgets and logistics, you didn't even notice how stressed I was. I tilted my head slightly, unfazed by her attempt to shift blame. And that stress justified lying? Sneaking around? Slapping me? Her face flushed, and she opened her mouth to respond. But no words came out. She wasn't used to being confronted like this, to having no room to wiggle out of the corner she'd backed herself into. I get it now, I continued. The slap wasn't just a moment of anger, was it? You wanted me to react. You wanted an excuse to end this without having to take responsibility for anything. Am I wrong? Her silence spoke volumes. You wanted me to lose my cool, I said, leaning slightly closer. But I didn't, and I won't. And that's why you're here now, scrambling to salvage whatever narrative you thought you could control. Adam, please, she said, her voice breaking as tears welled in her eyes. I messed up. I know I did. But we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I straightened, taking a step back. Fix what, Kendra? The trust? The respect? You think those things just snap back into place? Number, this isn't something you fix. This is who you are, and I'm not interested in being part of it. She stood up abruptly, her voice rising again. So that's it? You're just going to throw everything away? 4 years, Adam? 4 years? And you're going to walk away over one mistake? This wasn't one mistake. This was a series of choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to cross the line when I didn't give you the reaction you wanted. This isn't me throwing anything away. This is me walking away from someone who already did. Her tears came then, streaming down her face as she reached for me. I stepped back again, shaking my head. Don't. You don't get to play the victim here. Not after everything you've done. She stood there for a moment, her hand frozen midair before she let it drop. The tears didn't stop, but the fight in her eyes was gone. She knew she'd lost. Get out, I said quietly, pointing to the door. Her lips quivered as she whispered, Adam! Out, I said again, more firmly this time. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. She stopped just before leaving, turning back to me one last time. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond. The door closed behind her, and silence filled the room. After that confrontation, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Whatever lingering feelings I'd had for Kendra were gone, evaporated the second she confirmed every suspicion I'd been too cautious to fully trust. I didn't need closure because I'd just handed it to myself. But life has a funny way of keeping the show going. A couple of weeks passed and I started to feel like myself again. The house was mine again. Not just physically, but emotionally. It was quieter, cleaner, and most importantly, peaceful. I got back into my routine, focused on work, and even reconnected with a few friends I'd neglected during the relationship. That's when the first cracks in Kendra's new life started to appear. I hadn't heard much about her since she left, and I wasn't actively looking for updates. But mutual friends have a way of keeping you in the loop whether you want to be or not. Nate, my best friend and an absolute vault of information, called me one evening with that tone he gets when he's trying not to laugh too hard. Bro, he said, barely able to contain himself. You are not gonna believe this. What? I asked, already bracing for something ridiculous. Kendra moved in with Chase. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. And he dumped her. Hard. Now that got my attention. What do you mean, dumped her? I mean, he kicked her out, Adam, Nate said, clearly enjoying himself. Apparently, she's been staying with her parents ever since. Word is, he caught her cheating on him, too. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not just a chuckle, but a full-on can't-catch-my-breath laugh. Karma doesn't always work quickly, but when it does, it's poetic. Wait, I said, still grinning. She cheated on Chase? With who? Some guy from her gym, Nate said. Apparently, they'd been hooking up for weeks. Chase found out and threw her stuff out on the lawn. One of his neighbors took a video of it and posted it online. I shook my head, half in disbelief and half in satisfaction. Send me the video. Nate didn't even hesitate. Within seconds, I had a link to a grainy clip showing Chase tossing garbage bags full of Kendra's belongings onto the grass while she stood there, crying and yelling at him. He didn't say much, just pointed at her car and shouted something about her needing to leave before he called the cops. It was a mess. A perfect, karmic mess. I realized how it was so blatantly obvious that her pattern of self-destruction was finally catching up with her. Guess she's not as smooth as she thinks she is, I said, smirking. That's an understatement, Nate replied. Dude, it's wild. Everyone's talking about it. Even her little social media crew is turning on her. Taylor hasn't posted anything defending her since it happened. Taylor, Kendra's self-proclaimed best friend, had been one of the loudest voices trashing me online after the breakup. She'd posted all kinds of vague, passive-aggressive nonsense about fragile men and how real women intimidate the weak. I'd ignored it, of course, because engaging with her wasn't worth my time. Figures, I said. Taylor's all about appearances. She's not going to stick her neck out for Kendra if it makes her look bad. Exactly, Nate said. Anyway, just thought you'd want to know. Karma's doing its thing. We wrapped up the call, and I spent the rest of the evening replaying the video a couple more times, each time feeling a little less guilty for enjoying it. The days that followed were interesting, to say the least. I started hearing from more mutual friends, most of them either apologizing for doubting me or trying to dig for details about what had happened between me and Kendra. I kept it short and simple. She crossed a line. I ended it. That's all there is to it. The truth is, I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. People could think what they wanted. The ones who mattered knew the truth, and the rest? Not my problem. For now, I'm just planning to clear my head from all this mess, but I have a feeling that Kendra won't easily move on. Final update. Hey guys, I wasn't planning on posting an update, but something happened recently that I feel like I need to get off my chest. For those of you who followed my last post, you know I kicked Kendra out of my life after everything she pulled. The slap, the cheating, the manipulation. It was all too much, and I wasn't about to let her walk all over me anymore. Life's been solid since then, peaceful even. But of course, Kendra wasn't done yet. Last week, she showed up at my house. Yeah, you read that right. I wasn't expecting it. I hadn't heard from her in months, and I assumed she was off doing whatever it is people like her do when their life falls apart. I was sitting on the couch, halfway through a documentary, when there was a knock at the door. It was late, close to 10 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find her standing there. She looked rough, hair messy, eyes puffy, makeup smeared like she'd been crying the whole way over. She wasn't her usual composed, confident self. This was a different Kendra, one I barely recognized. Adam, she said, her voice shaky. Please, I need to talk to you. I didn't even let her finish. No, I said, stepping back to close the door. Wait, she cried, holding the doorframe. Please, just hear me out. I've been thinking about everything, and I know I messed up, but I've changed. I need you to know that. I stared at her, my hand still on the door. Kendra, I don't know what part of we're done you didn't understand, but nothing you say is going to change that. She started crying harder, her voice breaking. I know I hurt you, okay? I know I screwed up, but I've been going to therapy, journaling, working on myself. I've been trying to fix everything I ruined. I shook my head. Good for you, but that's not my problem anymore. Her tears didn't stop. Adam, please, I love you. I never stopped loving you. I didn't know how to handle things back then. I got lost. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that made her flinch. Lost? You didn't get lost, Kendra. You made choices. You cheated, you lied, and you slapped me. None of that was an accident, and none of it was my fault. So don't stand here and act like I owe you anything. Can't we just talk? She begged, her hands clasped together like she was praying. Just for a few minutes? No, I said firmly. We have nothing to talk about. Whatever you think we had, it's over. It's been over since the moment you decided to betray me. Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she might collapse. Adam, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't have anyone else. I stepped back, my hand tightening on the door. That's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to fix. I pushed the door closed, but she stopped it with her hand. Please, she said again, her voice desperate. Just give me a chance. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll prove to you that I've changed. I let out a sigh, leaning against the door frame. Kendra, you don't get it, do you? This isn't about whether you've changed or not. It's about the fact that I don't trust you anymore. You broke something that can't be fixed, and no amount of therapy or promises is going to change that. Her hand dropped, and she stepped back, her shoulders slumping. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the ground. Then she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. For everything. I nodded once. Good. Now go. I didn't wait for her to respond. I closed the door, locked it, and walked away without looking back. Through the window, I saw her standing on the porch for a few more minutes before she finally left. And that was it. No dramatic ending, no last-minute arguments, just a clean break. Honestly, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. It was like a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying had been lifted. People like Kendra don't change overnight. Maybe she'll figure herself out one day, but that's not my problem. And I'm not about to let her back in, just because she's finally realizing what she lost. Well, now for me, self-respect isn't negotiable. And once someone shows you who they really are, you don't give them the chance to do it again. Thank you guys for reading. Story 5. This story is titled, Parents Dumped Me for 9 years because of my sick sister. When they finally tried to reconnect, I pretended not to know them. Hey everyone, we put a lot of time and effort into finding these stories to keep bringing you the best content. If you enjoy what we do, it would mean the world if you hit that subscribe button. Your support really makes all the difference and keeps this journey going strong. Thanks so much for being here with me. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hey Reddit, I don't really post personal stuff like this often, but lately I've been doing a lot of reflecting on my past. This post is probably going to be long because there's a lot to unpack. I don't really remember every detail of when it happened, but certain parts stick out in my mind, even after all these years. I was 6 years old, and my parents told me I was going to visit my grandparents. It sounded exciting at the time because I loved visiting them. Gran always had cookies waiting, and she let me watch cartoons way past when I should have been in bed. My grandpa would take me outside to pick tomatoes in the garden, even though I didn't like tomatoes. I just liked hanging out with him. So when they said I'd be staying there for a little while, I didn't think anything of it. I remember my mom was really quiet that day. Quieter than usual. She hugged me before I left, but it didn't feel like her normal hug. It was stiff, kind of forced. My dad was rushing around like he had somewhere else to be. He barely said goodbye when he dropped me off. He didn't even come inside. He just kind of waved as he drove off. At the time, I thought maybe he was just in a hurry. It's funny how little kids don't see the bigger picture. I didn't realize I'd been abandoned. Not yet. At first, I kept asking Gran when my parents were coming back. She'd smile and say, Soon, sweetheart. I think she really believed that at first. I think we all did. But then days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Gran eventually stopped giving me answers. She just looked sad whenever I asked. Grandpa, who was usually so cheerful, started shaking his head and muttering under his breath whenever my parents came up. The real explanation came from my uncle. My uncle is my dad's younger brother, and he's always been the kind of person who tells it like it is. No sugarcoating. I was playing in the backyard when he came over one day. He sat me down on the swing set and told me, as gently as he could, that my parents weren't coming back. Not for a while, anyway. They think it's best for you to stay here, he said. I didn't understand. Why would it be best for me to stay here? Why weren't they coming back? He tried to explain that my sister was sick and that my parents needed to focus on taking care of her. Even at 6, I knew that didn't feel right. Why couldn't they take care of both of us? Why couldn't I go back home? He didn't have answers for that. And I could tell he was mad at my parents, though he didn't say it outright. I remember crying that night. Not just crying, but sobbing. Like the kind of crying where you can't breathe. Gran sat with me on the couch and rocked me back and forth like I was a baby again. She didn't say much. She just let me cry it out. I think that's when it really hit me that they weren't coming back for me. Life with Gran and Grandpa wasn't bad, though. They were loving and kind, and they tried to give me as much stability as they could, but they were also old and tired. I think it was a lot for them to suddenly have a little kid to take care of. That's where my uncle and aunt stepped in. My uncle, who didn't have kids of his own, started coming over more often. At first, he'd just help out, fixing stuff around the house, mowing the lawn, and taking me out to get ice cream when he could tell I needed cheering up. But after a while, it became clear that my grandparents couldn't keep up with me full time. So my uncle and his wife offered to take me in. I didn't want to leave Gran and Grandpa, but they sat me down one evening and explained that it was for the best. "You'll still see us all the time," Gran promised. And she was right. They only lived a few blocks away from my uncle, so I saw them almost every day. Living with my uncle and aunt was an adjustment at first. I was used to my grandparents' slower pace, and suddenly I was in a house with younger adults who had a completely different vibe. They were stricter in some ways. Bedtimes were actually enforced, but they were also more energetic. My uncle would play catch with me in the yard, and my aunt would bake cookies with me and let me decorate them, even though I was terrible at it. I started calling them Mom and Dad when I was around 8. It just kind of happened naturally. They never asked me to. They said I could call them whatever I wanted, but after a while, it just felt right. They were the ones who tucked me in at night, helped me with my homework, and came to my school events. The whole time, my bio parents were ghosts. I'd call them sometimes, but they wouldn't pick up. I'd send letters, but they wouldn't write back. Every now and then, Gran would get an update about my sister through one of her church friends, and that was the only way I ever knew what was going on with them. One time, when I was about 8 or 9, they did visit. I don't even remember why. Maybe they felt guilty, or maybe they just wanted to check the box of seeing their son. Whatever the reason, it was awkward. They acted like they didn't know what to say to me, and I didn't know what to say to them either. I was shy around them, like they were strangers. And honestly, that's what they felt like. They didn't stay long. I think the whole visit lasted an hour, tops. After they left, my uncle hugged me and said, "You don't need to worry about them, okay? We've got you." And that's when I decided that he was my real dad. My bio parents might have brought me into the world, but they weren't the ones raising me. Looking back, that drop-off at my grandparents' house was probably the most defining moment of my childhood. It's the moment my life split in two. The life I thought I'd have with my bio parents, and the life I ended up having with my uncle and aunt. I'm grateful for them every single day, but I'd be lying if I said that abandonment didn't leave some scars. By the time I was about 9, I had stopped asking about my bio parents as much. Not because I didn't care, I mean, they were my parents, right? But because asking never led to anything. I'd bring them up, and my grandparents would just get quiet. My uncle and aunt, though they tried to stay neutral, couldn't hide their frustration either. I guess I just got tired of the same non-answers. At first, I still tried to reach out to them. I'd send letters with little updates about school, like, "I got a gold star on my spelling test," or, "We're learning about dinosaurs," and T-Rex is my favorite. Looking back, they were probably the kind of things a little kid would think their parents would love to hear, but they never wrote back. Not once. I'd sit by the mailbox for days after sending something, hoping maybe this time they'd reply. Eventually, I just stopped waiting. When I was around 10, I had this old flip phone my uncle gave me. It didn't have games or anything cool on it, just basic calling and texting, but I loved it because it made me feel grown up. I used to call my parents sometimes, thinking maybe they'd pick up if it was their big boy son calling. They didn't. Not once. I left voicemails sometimes, but they never called back. One time I even asked Gran if maybe they'd lost my number or forgot where we lived. She just gave me this sad little smile and said, "Sweetheart, they know how to find you if they want to." I don't know why, but that hit me hard. The idea that they could call or visit anytime they wanted but just didn't, that was a tough pill to swallow. I think what really made me stop trying was this one visit when I was around 11. It was their first visit in years, and I got so excited when I heard they were coming. I cleaned my room, brushed my hair extra nice, and even put on this stupid button-up shirt my aunt said made me look handsome. When they showed up, though, it was like they barely knew me. They acted polite, like how you might act around a coworker's kid or something, but not like parents. My mom brought me this generic toy truck, and my dad just kind of sat there awkwardly, asking questions like, "So, how's school?" It felt weird, like they were strangers. I wanted to yell at them. "I'm your son. Why don't you know me?" But I didn't. I just sat there and gave short answers until they left. After that, I told my uncle I didn't want to see them anymore. He didn't push me on it, just said, "That's your choice, buddy. We'll support you no matter what." I stopped calling them, stopped writing, and honestly, they didn't even notice. The silence between us wasn't just me cutting them off, it was mutual. By the time I was 12, I decided I was done. No more reaching out, no more waiting for them to show up. I was over it. If they wanted me in their life, they'd have to prove it. Spoiler alert, they didn't. What made it easier to let go was how much my aunt and uncle stepped up. They didn't just take care of me, they parented me. My uncle went to every parent-teacher conference, even the boring ones where the teacher just said, "He's doing fine." My aunt would stay up late with me when I had a project due the next day, even though I'd procrastinated until the last minute. One summer, they even took me to Disneyland. I didn't really think much about it at the time, but looking back, I realize how much they saved up for that trip. We weren't rich or anything, but they wanted me to have that experience. My uncle even went on Space Mountain with me, even though he hates roller coasters. That's the kind of people they are. Meanwhile, my bio parents were basically ghosts. I didn't hear from them at all after that awkward visit. Gran mentioned them once in a while, like, "Your mom asked how you were doing," but it felt so hollow. If she cared, why didn't she ask me directly? It's not like my phone number changed. The last real update I got about them was when my sister got worse. Gran told me in passing that they'd moved to be closer to a hospital that specialized in her illness. I felt bad for my sister. I really did. But I also felt this resentment bubbling up. They could uproot their whole lives for her, but they couldn't pick up the phone to check on me? I tried not to let it get to me too much. My life with my uncle and aunt was good, stable. They made sure I had everything I needed, and they were always there for me, even when I didn't realize I needed them. I still saw my grandparents all the time, and they always made me feel loved. By the time I was a teenager, I think I'd come to terms with it. My bio parents weren't really my parents anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I started seeing my uncle and aunt as my real parents. They earned that title in every way that counts. What stuck with me, though, was this underlying sense of being disposable. Like, if my parents could just leave me like that, what did that say about me? Was I not worth fighting for? I didn't talk about those feelings much, but I think my uncle and aunt sensed it. One day, out of the blue, my uncle sat me down and said, "You know you're wanted, right? You're not just here because we had to take you in. We wanted you." I didn't cry in front of him because, you know, teenage boys don't cry. But later that night, I did. I think that's when I stopped thinking of myself as the kid my parents left and started thinking of myself as the kid my uncle and aunt chose. It made all the difference. By the time I was 14, I had settled into my life with my uncle and aunt as my new normal. I wasn't the kid who got left behind anymore, at least not in my day-to-day life. My uncle and aunt never made me feel like a burden. If anything, they treated me like I was the best thing that ever happened to them. One day, I overheard my aunt talking to my gran about how they'd never been able to have kids. She sounded so sad, saying, "We tried everything, but it just wasn't meant to be." I had no idea before that. They never talked about it around me, probably because they didn't want me to feel like some kind of replacement. But after I overheard that conversation, it started to make sense. The way they poured everything they had into raising me wasn't just because they were good people. It was because they really, genuinely wanted to be parents. It hit me differently after that. I mean, I'd always loved them, but realizing how much they'd been through made me appreciate them even more. They weren't just filling in for my bio parents. They chose me. Around this time, we started talking about adoption. My uncle brought it up casually one night after dinner. "How would you feel if we made this official?" he asked. At first, I didn't know what to say. I mean, they already felt like my parents in every way that mattered. Would a piece of paper really change anything? But the more we talked about it, the more it started to feel like a big deal. It wasn't just about legality, it was about belonging. They explained that adopting me wasn't as simple as just signing some forms. There were legal hurdles because my bio parents still had parental rights, even though they'd essentially abandoned me. My uncle said it would be expensive and complicated, but they were willing to go through it if it's what I wanted. I told them I'd think about it, and I did. A lot. I even talked to Gran about it, and she said something that stuck with me. "You already know where your heart belongs, sweetheart. This is just catching the rest of the world up." After a few months, I told my uncle and aunt I wanted to move forward with the adoption. That decision kicked off a long, frustrating process. Lawyers, court dates, paperwork. It felt like it would never end. My bio parents didn't contest it, of course. Why would they? It wasn't like they were fighting to keep me. But the system still made it harder than it needed to be. Even with all the hoops we had to jump through, my uncle and aunt were determined to make it happen. I think they wanted it as much as I did, maybe even more. They wanted me to know, without a doubt, that I was theirs. The adoption finally became official when I turned 18. I remember sitting in the courtroom, hearing the judge declare that my uncle and aunt were now my legal parents. It felt surreal. I'd been waiting for that moment for so long, and when it finally happened, I didn't even know how to react. My uncle hugged me afterward, and I could tell he was holding back tears. "We've always been your family," he said. "This just makes it official." That night, we celebrated with dinner at my favorite pizza place. It wasn't a fancy celebration, but it felt perfect. My aunt kept calling me her miracle kid, and my uncle said, "You were just misrouted by the stork at first, but we found you." Looking back, that moment stands out as one of the happiest days of my life. Not because the adoption changed how we felt about each other, it didn't, but because it erased any lingering doubt I had about where I belonged. The adoption also changed how I thought about my bio parents. For years, I'd been carrying this weight of not being wanted. But that day, it finally hit me that their rejection didn't define me. My uncle and aunt's love did. I started calling them mom and dad full time after that. It wasn't something we discussed or decided, it just happened naturally. They didn't say anything about it the first time I did, but I saw the way my aunt's face lit up when I said, "Thanks, Mom," as she handed me a plate of food. The adoption also marked the beginning of me fully letting go of my bio parents. Before that, I think a small part of me was still holding out hope that they'd come back, that they'd apologize, that they'd somehow make up for all the years they'd been gone. But after the adoption, I realized I didn't need that anymore. I already had everything I needed. Around this time, I started college. My new parents, it still feels weird calling them that even now, were my biggest cheerleaders. They helped me fill out my FAFSA, drove me to campus tours, and even bought me a new laptop as a graduation gift. When I moved into my dorm, my aunt cried, and my uncle pretended not to. College was a fresh start in a lot of ways. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't know anything about my past. I didn't have to explain why I didn't talk to my bio parents, or why I called my uncle and aunt mom and dad. I could just be me. Of course, I still went home for holidays and long weekends. Every time I walked through the door, my mom, my aunt, but now officially mom, would have cookies waiting, and my dad, my uncle, would ask me about every single detail of my classes. They made sure I knew that no matter where I went or what I did, I always had a place with them. In a weird way, I think being adopted at 18 meant more to me than if it had happened when I was younger. By then, I fully understood what it meant. It wasn't just about being taken in, it was about being chosen. My uncle and aunt didn't just take care of me out of obligation. They went out of their way to make me part of their family. That's something my bio parents never did. I was 20 when my sister passed away. It was late November, right after Thanksgiving. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in years, so hearing the news hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. I didn't cry, but it was like a weight settled in my chest that I couldn't shake. Gran was the one who told me. She called one evening and said, "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. Your sister passed away last night." Her voice was steady, but I could tell she was holding back tears. Gran had always stayed in touch with my bio parents more than I did, mostly because of her church circle. She'd hear updates about my sister through mutual friends, and sometimes she'd pass them on to me, but I never asked for details. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to grieve for her because she was my sister, but the truth is, I barely knew her. She was 14 when I was sent away, and by the time I was old enough to really remember her, I'd already been out of the picture for years. The memories I did have were faint, like flashes of moments we shared as kids. Playing tag in the yard, her braiding my hair for fun, even though I hated it, and her yelling at me for breaking her favorite doll. Those were the memories I clung to when I thought about her. But the reality was, she grew up without me, and I grew up without her. Gran told me the funeral would be in 2 weeks. She wasn't pushy, but I could tell she thought I should go. "It might give you some closure," she said softly. I told her I'd think about it. The next week, I wrestled with the decision. I didn't want to see my bio parents, but I also felt like not going would be wrong. My sister didn't deserve to be ignored just because I had problems with them. In the end, I decided to go, but I made it clear to my parents, through Gran, that I didn't want to talk to them. I showed up at the funeral late and slipped into the back row of the church. It was a small service, mostly family, and a few of my sister's friends. My bio parents were in the front, and even from the back, I could see how broken they looked. My mom kept dabbing at her face with a tissue, and my dad just stared straight ahead like he was in a daze. I didn't feel anything when I looked at them. No anger, no sadness, nothing. They were just two people I used to know. The service itself was short and quiet. The pastor talked about my sister's life, her strength, and how much she meant to the people who loved her. I sat there, feeling out of place. I didn't belong in that room, surrounded by people who knew her so much better than I did. When the service ended, I slipped out before anyone could stop me. I didn't want to get cornered by my parents or have some awkward conversation with relatives I hadn't seen in years. I just walked to my car and drove away. And drove. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. A few days later, my bio parents called my uncle. I guess they wanted to talk to me, but I told him to tell them I wasn't available. I didn't care what they had to say. They'd ignored me for years, and now they suddenly wanted to reconnect? It felt too convenient. Gran wasn't thrilled with my decision. She thought I should at least hear them out, but she didn't push me. She's always respected my boundaries when it comes to them. In the days that followed, I felt this weird mix of emotions. I wasn't sad for my parents. I couldn't be, after everything. But I did feel a sense of loss for the relationship I could have had with my sister. She was the one person who might have understood what I went through, and now she was gone. My uncle and aunt were amazing during this time, as they always are. My mom, my aunt, but she's mom to me now, kept checking on me, asking how I was feeling. My dad, my uncle, didn't say much, but he gave me these reassuring pats on the back whenever he saw me. They knew I wasn't grieving in the traditional sense, but they also knew this wasn't easy for me. What surprised me most was how much I thought about my sister after the funeral. I found myself digging through old photo albums, looking for pictures of us as kids. There weren't many, just a handful of us playing in the backyard or sitting together on Christmas morning. But those few pictures felt precious, like proof that we'd once been a real family, even if it was only for a little while. I also thought a lot about the life she must have had. Gran had told me bits and pieces over the years. My sister was strong, kind, and loved by everyone who knew her. She fought her illness with everything she had, and I respected her for that. But I also couldn't help but wonder if she ever missed me. Did she think about the little brother who got sent away? Did she feel guilty, even though none of it was her fault? I'll never know, and that's the hardest part. In the weeks after the funeral, my bio parents tried to reach out again. They sent a card through Gran, saying they wanted to talk. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready, if I'd ever be ready. The funeral didn't bring me closure, at least not the way Gran had hoped. If anything, it just brought up more questions. But it also solidified something for me. My parents and I were strangers now. They might have given me life, but they weren't my family. My family was the people who stood by me, who raised me, who loved me without conditions. Christmas was always a big deal for my family. Not my bio parents, of course. I'm talking about my uncle, aunt, gran, and grandpa. Ever since I started living with my uncle and aunt, they made Christmas special for me. Decorating the tree, baking cookies, blasting Christmas music. It was like something out of a holiday movie. For years, that was my Christmas tradition, and I loved it. This past Christmas felt a little different, though. It was the first one after my sister's funeral, and while I hadn't been close to her, the absence of her presence in the background of my life felt strange. My bio parents had tried to reach out to me a few times since the funeral, but I'd ignored every attempt. I figured they'd get the hint eventually. That night, I went to midnight mass with Gran, which was something we always did together. My aunt and uncle didn't usually come. They weren't really church people, but Gran loved the tradition, and I liked spending that time with her. It was one of those quiet moments where everything feels peaceful, and for a while it felt like the weight of everything that had happened was lifted off my shoulders. That peace didn't last long. About halfway through the service, I felt someone sit down behind us. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I caught a whiff of my mom's perfume. It's funny how smells can trigger memories. For a second, I was a little kid again, sitting on her lap while she read me a story. But that memory was quickly replaced by anger. What were they doing here? I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see them, and I definitely didn't want to talk to them. I focused on the service, but I could feel their presence behind me the entire time. It was like they were trying to bore holes into the back of my head with their stares. When the service ended, I stood up to leave with Gran, but before I could take 2 steps, my mom was in front of me. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly, like we were picking up a conversation we'd had yesterday. I froze. For a second, I didn't know what to do. Then without thinking, I said, "Sorry, do I know you?" Her face fell. I could see the shock and hurt in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was done pretending everything was okay. My dad stepped forward and said, "We're your parents." I shook my head. "My parents are at home," I said. Then I turned to Gran. "Are you ready to go?" Gran didn't say anything, but she gave me a little nod, and we started walking toward the door. My bio parents followed us, calling after me. "You really don't recognize us?" my mom asked. I stopped and turned around. "Oh, are you my dad's brother? I think I remember you from when I was little," I said, pretending to be confused. That was the final straw. My dad's face turned red, and my mom looked like she was about to cry. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it wasn't enough to make me stop. They had years to make this right, and they hadn't. Gran didn't say much on the way home. She just held my hand and squeezed it every now and then. I think she was proud of me for standing my ground, but she also knew how heavy the moment was for me. When we got back to the house, my aunt and uncle were waiting up for us. I told them what happened, and my uncle just shook his head. They don't get to play the victim now, he said. Not after everything. I went to bed that night feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me felt triumphant, like I'd finally stood up for myself in a way I never had before. But another part of me felt hollow, like maybe I'd crossed a line. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from my bio parents. My aunt handed it to me with a look that said, "You don't have to read this if you don't want to." But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The letter was long and emotional. They talked about how hurt they were by my reaction, how they'd only ever tried to do what was best for me, and how they'd always be my parents no matter what. They asked for forgiveness, saying they wanted to start fresh now that my sister was gone. I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. My family was divided on what I should do. Gran thought I was justified in how I handled it. They made their choice a long time ago, she said. Now they have to live with it. Some other relatives, though, thought I was being too harsh. They're grieving, one cousin said. Maybe this is their way of trying to make amends. But to me, it felt like too little, too late. Where were they when I was 8 and scared and confused? Where were they at my school plays, my birthdays, my graduation? They had their chance, and they blew it. The thing is, I don't hate them. I don't think I ever could. But I also don't feel like I owe them anything. They made their choice, and I made mine. For now, I'm focusing on the family that's always been there for me. My aunt and uncle, who raised me when my parents wouldn't, and Gran, who never stopped loving me. They're the ones who matter. After Christmas, things went back to normal, or as normal as they could be. I returned to school, buried myself in studying, and tried to push the awkward encounter at midnight mass out of my head. But my bio parents weren't done. About a week into January, another letter arrived. This one wasn't just emotional, it was almost desperate. My aunt handed it to me like she was holding a bomb, her eyes full of concern. "You don't have to read this," she said gently. But I did. I felt like I had to, even if it was just to see what they had to say. The letter was long, several pages, handwritten in my mom's neat script. She apologized, over and over, for what they'd done. She explained that they'd been overwhelmed when my sister got sick and had made decisions they thought were best for everyone, even if those decisions hurt me. She said they'd never meant to abandon me, but they didn't know how to juggle everything at the time. It sounded like excuses to me. They didn't know how to juggle everything? Plenty of families deal with tough situations without throwing one of their kids away like an old toy. The letter went on to talk about my sister's final years, how hard she'd fought, how much she missed me, and how she'd always hoped we could reconnect someday. That part stung. I'd spent so much time being angry at my parents that I never really thought about how my absence might have affected her. But then the tone shifted. My mom started talking about how, now that my sister was gone, they wanted to rebuild our family. She wrote that they loved me and missed me and hoped I'd give them a chance to make things right. The last line hit me the hardest. "No matter what you say or do, you'll always be our son." I put the letter down and stared at it for a long time. Part of me felt like they were trying to manipulate me, using my sister's memory to guilt me into forgiving them. But another part of me wondered if they really meant it. I didn't know what to do. I showed the letter to my uncle and aunt, who read it together in silence. When they finished, my uncle said, "It's your call, kiddo. But whatever you decide, we're here for you." Gran had a different take. "They made their bed, and now they want to unmake it because it's uncomfortable," she said. "Don't let them guilt you into anything you're not ready for." The thing was, I wasn't sure what I was ready for. On one hand, I didn't think I could ever forgive them for what they'd done. On the other hand, cutting them off completely hadn't made the hurt go away. For weeks, I carried that letter around with me, rereading it whenever I had a spare moment. I tried to imagine what it would look like to have a relationship with them again. Would it be awkward and forced? Or could we actually rebuild something meaningful? Eventually, I wrote them a response. It wasn't long, just a couple of paragraphs. I told them I appreciated their apology but wasn't ready to forgive them. I said I needed more time to process everything, and that I'd reach out if and when I was ready to talk. I didn't tell them I loved them. I didn't call them mom or dad. I just signed it with my name. When I sent the letter, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I'd finally said what I needed to say. Sadness because I knew it wasn't the happy ending they were hoping for. A few weeks later, my mom wrote back. Her letter was shorter this time, but the tone was different. It felt less desperate, more understanding. She said she respected my decision and would wait as long as it took for me to be ready. She didn't push or guilt trip me. She just said she loved me and wanted me to be happy, no matter what that looked like. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will someday, but for now, I'm focusing on the people who've always been there for me. My aunt and uncle, my real mom and dad, have done more for me than my bio parents ever did. They gave me a home, a family, and a sense of belonging. That's something my bio parents can't take away, no matter how much they try to reconnect. Gran says I handled the situation with more grace than she would have. You're a better person than me, sweetheart, she said with a little laugh. I would have told them where to stick it. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am too soft. But I like to think that setting boundaries while leaving the door open just a crack isn't weakness. It's me taking control of the situation on my own terms. For now, I'm at peace with where things stand. My bio parents might always be a part of my story, but they're not the whole story. The family that raised me, loved me, and chose me, that's my real family. And that's all I need. Story 6. My family only invited me to the birthday party, so they could brag about my sister's success after 15 years. Still doing that manual labor stuff, huh? She snickered, loud enough for everyone to hear, and they all laughed like it was a punchline. So I smiled, handed her my business card, and watched her go pale when she realized who signed her company's paychecks. What's up, Reddit? Names changed for obvious reasons, but this actually happened. Still processing it all, to be honest. I, 32 male, live in the suburbs outside Denver with my wife Emma and twin boys Connor and Tyler, both 6. Own a pretty successful landscaping and property management company now, but it wasn't always like this. 16 years ago, I was sleeping in my truck eating gas station sandwiches. Last Tuesday, I'm in my office reviewing proposals for a new corporate campus maintenance contract when my phone rings. Unknown number from my old area code. Almost sent it to voicemail, but something made me answer. David? Is that you? I knew that voice instantly, even though I hadn't heard it in over a decade. My mother. Yeah, it's me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, honey, I've been wanting to call for so long, but, well, you know how things ended between us. How things ended? Lady, you ended things when you chose your golden child over your own son. She went on about how she got my number from my Uncle Pete, the only family member who ever gave a darn about me, and how she's been following my success from afar. Real convenient timing, though, because apparently Amanda, my older sister and the family princess, was having her 36th birthday party this weekend. The whole family will be there, David. It would mean so much if you came. We could finally heal. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Emma found me just staring at my phone looking like I'd seen a ghost. That was your birth family? She asked softly. I nodded. After 16 years of silence, suddenly they want a reunion. Right when Amanda needs something, probably. Growing up in that house was like being the understudy in someone else's play. Amanda was 3 years older, and from day one she was the star. Beauty pageants, dance competitions, expensive art classes. Whatever Princess Amanda wanted, she got. Me, I was the afterthought. The kid who got dirty, worked with his hands, and wasn't sophisticated enough for their suburban social circle. Every dinner conversation revolved around Amanda's latest accomplishment. Amanda won first place in the regional dance competition. Amanda's art teacher says she has real talent. Amanda got accepted to that prestigious summer program. And me sitting there thinking, what about the garden I designed for our neighbor? What about organizing the community cleanup project? What about getting straight A's in environmental science and business math? But no, manual labor wasn't respectable in their eyes. Dad worked in finance and Mom was some fancy real estate agent. They had this vision of both their kids becoming white-collar professionals. Amanda fit the mold perfectly. I was the disappointment who preferred soil samples to spreadsheets. The breaking point came when I was 16. I'd been working landscaping jobs after school and weekends, saving every penny for horticulture school. Had my eye on this program at the community college. Only $4,500 for the full certification. I'll never forget sitting them down at the kitchen table, showing them the brochure, explaining how I'd already saved $2,000 and just needed help with the rest. Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. David, we're not funding some gardening hobby. Amanda needs money for her college applications and portfolio development. What about my future? I asked. Mom sighed like I was being unreasonable. Sweetheart, Amanda has real potential. She could become an interior designer or go into marketing. You're good with plants, sure, but that's not a career path for someone from our family. Amanda just sat there smirking, knowing she was about to get another check while I got lectured about realistic expectations. That night, I packed everything I owned into my beat-up pickup truck. About $2,100 in cash, some clothes, and my grandfather's old gardening tools he'd left me. Nobody tried to stop me. Nobody asked where I was going. I left a note saying, gone to grow my own future since apparently I'm not worth investing in. Never looked back. First few months were brutal. Slept in my truck most nights, showered at truck stops, lived off dollar menu burgers and gas station coffee. But I was determined to prove them wrong. Found work with this gruff old landscaper who owned a small company. Guy took one look at me, probably saw how desperate I was, and said, "Kid, you look hungry. Can you tell the difference between annual and perennial plants?" Started as the lowest guy on the crew, hauling mulch, pulling weeds, doing all the grunt work nobody else wanted. But I watched everything, asked questions, stayed late to help finish projects. My boss noticed. After about 6 months, he started teaching me the real stuff. How to design irrigation systems, proper pruning techniques, soil analysis, plant identification. I soaked it up like a sponge. Most guys your age just want the paycheck, he would say. You actually give a darn about doing it right. Been working there about 2 years when guess who shows up at one of our job sites? Amanda and her college friends, slumming it on some sociology project about working class culture or some nonsense like that. I was up on a ladder trimming oak trees when I heard that familiar laugh. Looked down, and there she was, designer jeans and all, pointing up at me while her friends giggled. "Oh my God, that's my little brother," she announced loud enough for the whole crew to hear. "Still playing in the dirt, I see." Her friends thought it was hilarious. "This is like so authentic," one of them said. "A real blue-collar worker." I wanted to climb down and tell them exactly what I thought, but my boss grabbed my arm. "Don't give them the satisfaction," he said quietly. "Keep working. Show them what real work looks like." That night, my phone rang. Dad, of course. "David, your sister said she saw you at some landscaping site today. Please tell me you're not planning to make a career out of gardening." "It's honest work," I said. "It's embarrassing," he shot back. "What are we supposed to tell people when they ask what our son does? That he's a common laborer? Tell them I'm building something with my life instead of waiting for handouts." He hung up on me. Story of my life. My boss was getting older and started talking about retirement. One day he pulled me aside after we finished a complete landscape renovation that came out absolutely perfect. "Dave, you've got something most guys never develop. Vision. You can see how all the pieces fit together. Not just the plants and design, but the business side too." He'd been watching me interact with clients, handle estimates, coordinate with suppliers. Said I had a natural ability to manage projects from start to finish. "I got an offer on the business," he continued. "Big corporate landscaping company wants to buy me out, but I'd rather sell to someone who'll keep the quality standards meaning something." My heart stopped. "You talking about selling to me?" "I'm talking about selling to you for half what the corporation offered, with owner financing. You pay me monthly for 5 years. After that, it's all yours." I barely slept that night. This was my shot, my chance to prove I could build something real. Signed the papers 2 weeks later. The company became Evergreen Property Services. I kept the same quality standards, but started putting my own stamp on things. Better communication with clients, detailed project timelines, quality guarantees that actually meant something. Business grew steadily. Word got around that we did beautiful work on time and on budget. Started getting referrals from previous clients, then referrals from those referrals. About 3 years after taking over, I landed my first big commercial contract, an office complex with full landscape design and ongoing maintenance worth $850,000 annually. Successfully managed the installation and kept their grounds looking perfect year-round. The property manager was so impressed he offered me another contract. Then another. Within 2 years, I had a crew of 12 full-time employees and was pulling in over $3 million annually. That's when I met Emma. She was the facilities coordinator for a medical building we maintained. Smart, professional, but down to earth. Didn't care what kind of truck I drove or whether I wore suits to meetings. "You know what I like about you?" she said one day as we reviewed maintenance schedules. "You actually listen when people talk. Most contractors just want to get in, get out, get paid." We got married 2 years later. Simple ceremony at a botanical garden I'd helped design for the city. My old boss walked me down the aisle since my own father couldn't be bothered to return my calls. By age 28, I'd expanded into full property management services. Not just landscaping, but facility maintenance, cleaning services, snow removal, everything commercial properties needed to look professional and function properly. Started Rocky Mountain Property Group with 4 divisions: landscaping, maintenance, cleaning, and seasonal services. Had 45 full-time employees and was grossing $12 million a year. But the real breakthrough came when I landed a contract with the state government. They needed someone to oversee grounds maintenance for all government buildings in 3 counties. A $28 million contract with strict standards and zero tolerance for delays. I assembled the best team I'd ever worked with. horticulturists, facilities engineers, project managers who shared my vision of getting things done right the first time. We exceeded every performance metric and came in under budget every quarter. The governor himself showed up for a site visit at the state capitol complex. David Martinez has shown what's possible when you combine environmental expertise with modern business practices, he said. This is the kind of partnership that makes our state more beautiful and efficient. Local news covered it. Business journals wrote articles. Suddenly, I was the poster boy for hometown success stories. Emma found one of the articles, framed it, hung it in our home office. Remember when they said you'd never amount to anything? She said with a smile. That same week, Emma told me she was pregnant. Twins. Connor and Tyler arrived healthy and perfect, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to have a real family. But success has a way of attracting attention from people who ignored you when you had nothing. Which brings us back to that phone call. After talking it over with Emma, I decided to go to Amanda's party. Not because I forgave them, but because I wanted them to see what they'd thrown away. Are you sure about this? Emma asked. They hurt you pretty badly. I'm sure, I said. It's time they learned what their choices cost them. So that Saturday evening, all four of us drove to Amanda's new house in the fancy part of town. Big, colonial, circular driveway, the works. Clearly, someone had been financing her lifestyle pretty well. We walked in, and heads immediately turned. Same faces from childhood parties and family gatherings, all looking at me like I was some kind of curiosity. My mother rushed over, arms outstretched. David! Oh my goodness, you came! And this must be Emma and the boys? Amanda emerged from the kitchen, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Still the center of attention, still soaking up compliments from relatives about her sophisticated taste and artistic vision. When she saw me, her expression shifted slightly. Not quite hostile, but definitely calculating. Little brother, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Look at you, all cleaned up. I bet you don't even get your hands dirty anymore, do you? The room chuckled. Same old dynamic. Amanda gets the laughs, Dave gets put in his place. But then she kept going. I mean, we all wondered what happened to you after you ran away from home. Mom said you were doing some kind of landscaping work? That's so authentic. Very outdoorsy chic. More chuckles. I could feel Emma tense up beside me. Must be nice having such simple work, Amanda continued, really warming up now. No stress, no real responsibility. Just show up, plant some flowers, collect your paycheck. I honestly envy that sometimes. My interior design consultancy is so demanding, dealing with high-end clients who expect perfection. She paused for effect, swirling her glass. But hey, someone has to do the manual labor, right? Not everyone can be management material. The room went quiet. Even by Amanda's standards, that was pretty brutal. But instead of getting angry, I smiled, reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my business card. Premium cardstock, embossed logo, the works. Amanda, I think you dropped this earlier, I said, handing it to her. She looked confused but took the card. Her expression changed as she read it. Rocky Mountain Property Group, she read aloud, voice getting quieter. David Martinez, President and CEO. My cousin Danny grabbed the card from her. Dude, is this real? He pulled out his phone, started typing. Within seconds, his eyes went wide. Holy cow, Dave! You're all over Google! Local landscaper becomes multi-millionaire businessman. Rocky Mountain Property Group wins largest state contract in history. This says you employ over 150 people. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, pulling out phones, searching my name. My mother looked like she'd seen a ghost. But Amanda went full entitled princess mode. Well, she said, voice dripping with fake sweetness, isn't that just wonderful? Little Davy found a way to make money off manual labor. How resourceful. I should probably mention something I found out later that evening. Amanda's successful interior design consultancy? Complete nonsense. She'd been living off mom and dad's money for years, racking up credit card debt and bouncing from one failed business venture to another. The fancy house? Mom and dad's name on the mortgage? The designer clothes? Credit cards? The whole sophisticated lifestyle? Funded entirely by the same parents who couldn't spare $2,500 to help their son get an education. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After the initial shock of everyone discovering my actual success wore off, Amanda tried to regain control of the narrative. You know, David, I always knew you had potential, she said, clearly lying. We should really connect more often. I mean, we're both business owners now. Maybe we could collaborate on some projects. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I stood up. Amanda, Can I talk to you privately for a minute? She nodded, probably thinking she could work some angle. We stepped out onto the back patio where we couldn't be overheard. I need to tell you something, I said quietly. About 3 months ago, the city put out bids for the new Civic Center landscape design. Mixed-use spaces, public gardens, $47 million project. Her eyes lit up. Oh my God, that would be perfect for my consultancy. We could... I won the bid, I interrupted. Work starts next month. She stared at me, not understanding. Amanda, I employ 200 people now. I own the largest property services company in the tri-state area. I just bought a mountain cabin that's worth more than mom and dad's retirement fund. And you know what the best part is? I leaned closer. I'm hiring subcontractors for interior work on that Civic Center project. Had 3 different firms submit proposals. Guess whose company didn't even make the list? Her face went white. But hey, I continued, maybe you could apply for one of our entry-level positions. We're always looking for good people. Starting wage is $18 an hour. Probably more than you're making now from whatever trust fund Dad set up. I walked back inside, leaving her on the patio looking like she'd been slapped. The party continued, but the energy had completely shifted. Instead of Amanda holding court, everyone wanted to talk to me. About business, about opportunities, about whether I remembered them from when we were kids. Around 10 p.m., as we were getting ready to leave, my mother pulled me aside. David, I owe you an apology. We were wrong about you. We should have supported your dreams instead of pushing our expectations. Too little, too late. But I appreciated the effort. We were hoping, she continued, that maybe we could rebuild our relationship. Amanda's been going through some financial difficulties lately, and with your success, perhaps you could help family get back on their feet. And there it was, the real reason for the reconciliation attempt. Mom, I said gently, Amanda had 16 years to build a relationship with me. She chose mockery instead. You and Dad had 16 years to show you cared about my success. You chose silence instead. But we're family, she protested. No, I replied. Emma and the boys are my family. The people who work for me and trust me to make payroll every week are my family. You're just people I used to know who happen to share some DNA. We left that night with handshakes and polite goodbyes. But I knew it wasn't over. 3 weeks later, my phone started ringing constantly. Mom, Dad, Amanda, various aunts and uncles, all suddenly very interested in maintaining family connections. The calls got more desperate as word spread about just how successful I'd become. Local newspaper ran a feature story about Rocky Mountain Property Group. I got invited to speak at the Chamber of Commerce. The governor announced that our Civic Center project would serve as a model for sustainable urban development statewide. That's when Amanda showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed me. Mr. Martinez, there's an Amanda Martinez here to see you. Says she's your sister? I told her to send Amanda up. She walked into my corner office looking around at the awards on the walls, the view of the mountains, the conference table where I held meetings with city planners and bank presidents. Nice place, she said, trying to sound casual. Very corporate. What do you want, Amanda? She sat down across from my desk, crossed her legs, put on her most charming smile. David, I've been thinking about what you said at the party, about opportunities in your company. I realize I may have been dismissive of your work over the years. Dismissive. That's one way to put it. I'd like to make it up to you. I have extensive experience in design and client relations. I could be a real asset to your facilities division. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me about this extensive experience. Her smile flickered. Well, I've been running my own consultancy for 5 years now. Amanda, I had you investigated after the party. Professional curiosity. The smile disappeared completely. Your consultancy consists of 3 clients. Total revenue last year of $31,000 and debts of over $180,000. You've been living off mom and dad's money while pretending to be a successful businesswoman. She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. The house you're living in? I know about the mortgage. The car you drive? I know about the payments. The credit cards you've maxed out trying to maintain your lifestyle? I know about those too. She stared at me, face flushed with embarrassment and anger. What I want to know, I continued, is why you think I'd hire someone who spent decades telling people I'd never amount to anything. Because I'm family, she said quietly. Family doesn't mock each other's dreams. Family doesn't call each other's work simple and authentic. Family sure doesn't laugh when their brother is breaking his back to build something meaningful. I stood up, walked to the window overlooking the parking lot where my crew was loading equipment for the day's jobs. You want to know what family looks like, Amanda? It's my old boss teaching a kid with nothing how to read soil reports. It's my guys working overtime to meet a deadline because they know I'll do the same for them. It's Emma believing in me when I was just another landscaper with big dreams. I turned back to face her. You're not family. You're just someone who wants something from someone you spent years looking down on. Amanda tried tears next, then anger, then bargaining, offered to work for free to prove herself, promised she'd changed, that she finally understood my worth. But here's the thing about respect. You can't demand it, and you can't fake your way into it. You earn it through your actions over time. And Amanda's actions for 3 decades had shown me exactly who she was. I had my assistant escort her out. 6 months later, Rocky Mountain Property Group was featured on the cover of Regional Business Magazine. From soil to success, how David Martinez built a property management empire. The article detailed our expansion into 4 states, our reputation for quality work and fair wages, and our commitment to environmental sustainability. It mentioned that I'd started with nothing but a pickup truck and a set of gardening tools. That same week, Amanda's house went into foreclosure. Mom called crying, begging me to help save the family home that Amanda had been living in. Apparently, the consultancy had finally folded completely, and without any real income, she couldn't even make minimum payments on her debts. She's learned her lesson, David, Mom pleaded. She knows she was wrong about you. Can't you find it in your heart to help your sister? I'll help her the same way you helped me when I needed it, I replied. I'll tell her she should have made better choices and hang up. A month later, Dad called, more desperate than I'd ever heard him. Son, I know we haven't been good to you, but Amanda, she's talking about bankruptcy. She might have to move back in with us, and frankly, we can't afford to support her anymore. Sounds like a problem you should have considered before spending my college fund on her art classes. David, please. What do you want me to say? That we were wrong? We were wrong. That we should have supported you? We should have. Just tell me what it will take for you to help your family. I thought about it for a long moment. Dad, you want to know what it would take? It would take Amanda getting a real job. Not some fantasy consultancy, not some get-rich-quick scheme. A real job where she shows up every day, works hard, and earns what she makes. She's trying, but with her background is being a spoiled princess who never learned that the world doesn't owe her anything. Time she figured it out. But if you could just loan her enough to get back on her feet. Nope. She made fun of people who show up and collect paychecks. Remember? Well, now she gets to find out what that's actually like. I hung up and went back to reviewing plans for our next project. A university campus that would bring 300 jobs to a struggling part of the state. Real work that actually mattered. This is where it gets really good, Reddit. Last month, I got a call from one of my project supervisors on a residential maintenance contract. Good guy. Been with the company for 8 years, knows his stuff. Boss, I got a situation here. Woman showed up looking for work. Says she has experience in design. Willing to do anything. Problem is, she's asking for management wages, but doesn't know the difference between annuals and perennials. What's her name? I asked. Amanda Martinez. Wait, Martinez? She related to you? I drove out to the job site that afternoon. Sure enough, there was Amanda in discount store work clothes that still looked too clean, talking to my supervisor like she was doing him a favor by applying. When she saw me, her face went through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds. David, I didn't know this was your project. Your supervisor here was just explaining the opportunities for someone with my skill set. My supervisor looked confused. Boss, you two know each other? Amanda's my sister. Amanda, he tells me you're looking for work. She straightened up, trying to regain some dignity. I'm exploring opportunities in the property services industry, bringing my design expertise to a more hands-on environment. Show her around. Explain what we actually do here. For the next hour, I watched Amanda try to fake her way through basic landscaping terminology. She called pruning shears cutting things. She thought mulch was decorative dirt. She suggested we use prettier flowers for a drought-resistant native plant installation. My supervisor was trying not to laugh. The crew was openly staring. Finally, I called her over. Amanda, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you a job. Same offer I make everyone who wants to work in landscaping. Her eyes lit up. Really? What position? General laborer. $16 an hour. No benefits for the first 90 days. You'll plant flowers, spread mulch, and follow orders from whoever's supervising your crew. If you can stick it out for 6 months without complaining, we'll talk about training you for skilled positions. The look on her face was priceless. Like I'd asked her to eat dirt. $16 an hour? David, I have a college degree. I ran my own business. Into the ground, I reminded her. This is an honest job, Amanda. The kind you used to make fun of me for having. Take it or leave it. She looked around at the crew, all watching this drama unfold. These were people who'd worked their way up from nothing, earned every promotion through sweat and skill. They had no patience for entitled nonsense. I'll think about it, she said. No thinking required. Yes or no. She stood there for a long moment, probably weighing her options. Pride versus desperation. Fantasy versus reality. This is beneath me, she finally said. Then stay beneath where you belong, I replied. She left in her car, the one that was about to be repossessed, and I never saw her again on any of my job sites. The calls kept coming, though. Mom, Dad, various relatives who suddenly remembered they had a successful family member, all wanting loans, investments, job recommendations, business partnerships. I turned them all down. See, here's what they never understood. Success isn't just about money. It's about respect. And respect can't be bought, borrowed, or inherited. It has to be earned through your actions, your character, your willingness to stand behind your word. For 30 years, my birth family showed me exactly what they thought I was worth. They chose Amanda's dreams over mine. They chose appearances over substance. They chose easy over right. Now they wanted me to forget all that because suddenly I was useful to them. But that's not how it works. 3 months ago, I got the call I'd been expecting. Amanda had filed for bankruptcy. Lost the house, the car, everything. Moved back in with Mom and Dad at age 36 with nothing but debt and delusions. Dad called sobbing. Actually sobbing. David, please, she's our daughter. We can't just watch her destroy her life. You watched me struggle for 16 years and did nothing. Figure it out. But you succeeded. You didn't need our help. I succeeded because I didn't have your help. I learned to depend on myself, to work for what I wanted, to treat people with respect regardless of their job title. Amanda never learned any of that because you enabled her nonsense for 3 decades. What if she does something desperate? I thought about that. Despite everything, I didn't want genuine harm to come to her. Tell you what, Dad, I'll make the same offer I made Amanda. She can apply for an entry-level position at one of my companies. Real work, real wages, real expectations. If she can prove she's willing to change, I'll consider helping her build something legitimate. She'll never accept that. Then she'll never get my help. That was 6 weeks ago. Haven't heard from any of them since. Yesterday, everything came full circle in the most perfect way possible. I was meeting with the mayor about a new municipal park project when his assistant mentioned they'd received some inquiries from local design firms wanting subcontracting opportunities. Actually, she said, there was one woman who seemed particularly desperate. Amanda Martinez? Said she was related to you somehow and implied that might help her chances? I laughed out loud. Even at rock bottom, Amanda was still trying to ride my coattails instead of building her own ladder. What did you tell her? That all subcontractors are evaluated solely on their qualifications and portfolio. She said she'd be back with proper documentation, but that was 2 weeks ago. When I got home, Emma was making dinner, while the boys worked on homework at the kitchen table. Normal family chaos, the kind I never had growing up. How was your day? She asked. I told her about Amanda's latest scheme. Emma just shook her head. I almost feel sorry for her, she said. Almost. Don't. She made her choices. That evening I got a text from my Uncle Pete, the one family member who'd always been decent to me. Dave, I know you're done with this family drama, but thought you should know. Amanda tried to get a job at a fast food place yesterday. Walked out after 2 hours when they asked her to clean the grill. Your parents are beside themselves. I showed the text to Emma. We both started laughing. From interior design consultancy to fast food in 1 year, she said. That might be a record. But here's the thing that really got me. That same week, I got a LinkedIn message from my old boss. He was 73 now, fully retired, living in Arizona. Dave, saw the article about you in the magazine. Couldn't be more proud if you were my own son. You took everything I taught you and built something amazing. That's what legacy really looks like. That message meant more to me than any family reunion ever could, because he saw potential in me when I had nothing. He invested his time and knowledge without expecting anything in return. He treated me with respect when respect was all I had to give. That's what real family does. So Reddit, that's my story. The family that wrote me off as a failure now begs for handouts from the success they mocked. The sister who called my work simple now can't handle the simplest job on the planet.